And tonight on the ABC News, OJ Simpson kills one more person. Oh my God, I can't believe it. OJ kills another person? I didn't know Minute Maid orange juice could kill people. I guess what happened here was that someone poisoned the OJ and, killed somebody. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on ABC, the horrible news in the whole world. Thank you. Well, I hope you liked how I did my commercials. I'm gonna be a star. I've always been a star, I just have to go to Hollywood, and then I'll just, everybody would be like going, oh, I want your autograph, oh, I want your autograph. But anyways, see you later. Adios. Ciao.
Ladies and gentlemen, and you people in chat, thank you so much for being here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whoever you are, whatever you're doing it with, however good it feels, etc., etc. I am still just super glad and happy that you're doing it right here with me. It is Thursday. It is OJ Day. We're winding down OJ. Not a whole lot of OJ left, but we still got a few weeks. We are now starting. Finally, we've put Chris Darden to bed. The prosecution has finished their closing arguments. Now we're getting into the defense arguments. That's where we're getting the defense. The defense are starting their closing arguments, which means we get Johnnie Cochran right out of the gate today. Chandler will be joining us here in just a minute. And the intro, I'm going to be sad when that intro goes away. That's internet's very own Ari Jacob. Ari was a cutie, wasn't? Oh, exactly. Someone just said that there in chat. Yeah, that was Ari Jacob when she was, I believe, 13 years old. She said we could use that. And speaking of Ari Jacob, do not miss it. 1 week from tomorrow, Friday. 1 week from Friday on the 19th. You are not going to want to miss our F It Friday. That's where we just say F it. It's a griftathon. It's a super duper January griftathon for me, where I try to liberate as much money from you as possible just on one day of the month to get it out of the way. All in good fun. It's all in good sport. It's all just a goofy little time we all have. But in return, every $100 that comes in, of course, as you may well know, we do shots. We do a shot. And also, I bring you a great panel of guests. Next week's panel of guests is phenomenal. It's an all-ladies F It Friday. Something I'm going to call Legal Vices Lady Bits. So Legal Vices Lady Bits will be next Friday starting at right around 7 p.m. Eastern. It's the Ladies' Night Boozy Griftathon, and so far we've got Flux will be there, Lauren De Laguna, Steph the Alter Nerd, Chandler Remington, Ari Jacob, who we just saw, Radix Verum Christina, Talk with Sally, Waifu Kron Jess, AV to the 7th Power, Lady Law 5791 will be there, Jasmine Jafar, and many, many others, I hope. Those are the ones we've got locked in, though, and there should be more joining us later. So you're not going to want to miss that. And then Monday, of course, will be Maritime Monday. Tuesday, we're going to be looking more closely. We're going to be looking at some documents and some other news relating to the case we covered the other day of Jane versus Clayton. I'm sorry, I got thrown off with the Jane Doe. Oh my God, my mind just totally went blank. I should not do that. It was don't think on the spur of the moment. You get yourself in trouble. Clayton, dude, what the hell's your last name? Holy crap. My mind just totally went blank on me. Nobody help me out here. Come on. Eckerd. Dang it. Clayton Eckerd. Oh, phew. Wow, my brain just died. Okay, yeah, so Monday, Maritime Monday. Tuesday, more information, more documents relating to the Jane Doe and Clayton Eckerd case. Wednesday, don't know yet. Thursday, more OJ, and then next Friday is the Legal Vices Lady Bits F It Friday. So that's what's coming up in the next week. All right. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. So before we do that, let's jump very quickly in here. We got 91 viewers. Everybody is tired of OJ. Once OJ dies, once the case goes away, that was a poor choice of words. Once we finish with the case, which will be a few weeks from now, we're just wrapping it up with the closing arguments. Then we're going to start a new case. Thursdays will be a new case day that Chandler has chosen. We're going to cover it gavel to gavel. It was about a 3-week trial, and that's all I'm going to tell you about it. And right now, get on over there, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and take our like and subscribe poll. What's our like and subscribe poll today? Because Johnnie Cochran is starting the closing arguments for the defense today, I thought we'd do our Johnnie Cochran poll. Like, subscribe, and vote. Worst catchphrases rejected by Johnnie Cochran, who, as you know, made famous the term race card. We're gonna see its inception into the popular culture here in just a minute. From these closing arguments, we got race card. We also got the if it does not fit, you must acquit, which was a pretty damn good catchphrase. So which ones did you consider and throw away? Here's our worst catchphrases rejected by Johnnie Cochran. Small cap, beat the rap. Loose belt, case melt. Cap fit fail, skip jail. And short pants, guilty, no chance. Sorry, that's the best I could do. That's the very, very best I could come up with. So, and you have no idea how much time I spent trying to think of those lame ones. But all right, we've got Doggo Cam locked and loaded over here. The dogs are sleeping peacefully in front of the space heater. So if we unlock that achievement, we got Doggo Cam. And again, this is a sort of a chill stream. Super chats are not required to interact with me or Chandler or each other, but they're always graciously and gratefully accepted, and it does guarantee you'll get yourself read. And if you're watching this on the replay crew, like and subscribe. Okay, that's it. We are done in record time, I think. Only 8 minutes. Let's jump into the case right now, beginning with the defense's closing arguments. All righty, what do we got here? Let's bring it on up. Boom. We want to be embiggen because I'm a handsome dog, and I know you want to see that. All right, there we go. Judge Ito, take it away.
All right, the record should reflect that we've been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
And as I mentioned to you, we had some preliminary matters we had to take up out of your presence. We're now ready to proceed with the defense argument.
Here we go.
Mr. Cochran.
The moment we've been waiting for.
Judge Ito, my colleagues on the defense, my colleagues in the prosecution, the Goldman family, the Brown family, to the Simpson family. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The defendant, Mr. Ronald James Simpson, is now afforded an opportunity to argue the case, if you will. But I'm not going to argue with you, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm going to do is to try and discuss the reasonable inferences which I feel can be drawn from this evidence.
He's what, a minute into this, and he's already way more engaging than Darden was during the hours and hours he spent. The others,
and thanking you for the service that you've rendered. You are truly a marvelous jury. The longest serving jury in Los Angeles County, perhaps the most patient and healthy jury we've ever seen. I hope that your health and your good health continues. We met approximately 1 year and 1 day ago on September 26, 1994. I guess we've been together longer than some relationships, as it were.
This is what vocal inflection sounds like.
In this matter, in that you've been the judges of the facts. We have been advocates on both sides. The judge has been the judge of the law. We all understand our various roles in this endeavor that I'm going to call a journey toward justice. That's what we're going to be talking about this afternoon as I seek to address you. The final test of your service as jurors will not lie in the fact that you stayed here more than a year, but will lie in the quality of the verdict that you render and whether or not that verdict bespeaks justice as we move towards justice. Now, you'll recall during a process called voir dire examination, each of you were thoroughly questioned by the lawyers.
Told you that's how we pronounce it out
You
west.
probably thought, gee, I wish they'd leave me alone. But you understood, I'm sure, that this is very serious business. Our client, Mr. Orenthal James Simpson, is on trial for his life. And so we had to be very, very careful, both sides, in trying to get people who could be fair to both sides. You'll recall those questions, that you keep an open mind, which I hope you still have even to this day, that you wouldn't be swayed by sympathy for or passion against either side in this case, that you would give both sides of this lawsuit the benefit of your individual opinion.
This is an Oliver
No
Siri
one-
v.
No one
Melania
can tell you
Figueroa.
what the facts are. That's going to be your job to determine. It's not a question of age or experience. We talked about that. This is one of those jobs where you kind of learn on the job. And so it's important that you fully understand that. And that's why voir dire was so very important, as we ask you all of those questions before you were
Isn't he just soothing?
sequestered.
He just
before
sounds
you were actually picked.
soothing to me. Just the
Now,
way
each
he
of you
talks. He
filled out
down
the questionnaire, and you answered the questions honestly, I'm sure. Now, Cicero said,
Oh, Cicero? He's going to break out Cicero here in a second? Wow. But see, I like what he does. He does the downspeak. Hey, we just had Darden just doing this big monotone mumble thing, and he was just kind of, going through the case. But when you have someone with a good tenor baritone bass, and then they do the downspeak, it's soothing, it's warm, it's embracing, it's friendly, and it makes you feel like he's paying attention to you. That's why speak when you do speaking courses and things like that, they'll tell you to downspeak, because it does. If you're doing this, it sounds unsure. If you do the upspeak, it sounds like you're unsure and you're asking questions. If you're just monotone, or it can sound pedantic. It can sound like you're talking down to someone. But when you're giving the downspeak, it's like, hey, we're part of the group. It's warm. It's inviting. You're part of it. We know. I liked it anyway. I just love his
a
delivery.
long time ago, that he who violates his oath profanes the divinity of faith itself. And of course, both sides of this lawsuit have faith that you live up to your promises. And I'm sure you'll do that. Abraham Lincoln said that jury service is the highest act of citizenship. So if it's any consolation to you, you've been involved in that very highest act of citizenship. And so again, we applaud you and we thank you as we move toward justice. One other entity or group of ladies, or two ladies that I should thank, are our marvelous court reporters. They have been patient with us. They've been here from the very beginning. We very much appreciate them and their services. And I especially appreciate them, because sometimes I speak
that's why the
they
preachers
have
do
a
it,
tough time keeping up with me.
because you're part of
So I
it.
trust
They
that
want you to be
today,
warm. They want you to
If
be
I start to
invited.
speak too
That's how
fast
that
in my
goes.
zeal, Ms. Moxon and Chris will bring that to my attention. I'm
There's
sure
a
they will.
reason preachers speak like that.
Now, in the course of this process where we're discussing the reasonable inferences of the evidence, I ask you to remember that we're all advocates. We're all officers of this court. I will recall the evidence and speak about the evidence. Should I misstate that evidence, please don't hold that against Mr. Simpson. I will never intentionally do that. In fact, I think you'll find that during my presentation, unlike my learned colleagues on the other side, I'm going to read you testimony, what the witnesses actually said. So there'll be no misunderstanding
Oh,
about what was said.
that's a punch right in Chris Darden's face. Because, a great deal of Chris Darden's arguments were, well, you remember, right? I think this, maybe it was this person, but I believe they testified to this. I think they testified to this, didn't they? He was unsure about who his own witnesses were, what they were saying, what they testified to. And he's like, we're just going to read you the transcript. We're going to tell you what they said. You can hear what they said. We're not going to guess. We're not going to play around here. We're going to read you the transcript. We're going to tell you
about certain key things. But remember that we're all advocates. And I think it was Ms. Clark who said, saying it so doesn't make it so.
Uh-oh.
I think that applies very much to their arguments. Ultimately,
God damn it.
it's what you determine to be the facts. It's what's going to be important. And all of us will live with that. You are empowered to do justice. You are empowered to ensure that this great system of ours works. Listen for a moment, will you, please?
Oh.
One of my favorite people in history is the great Frederick Douglass. He said shortly after the slaves were freed, quote, "In a composite nation like ours, as before the law, there should be no rich, no poor, no high, no low, no white, no black, but common country, common citizenship, equal rights."
Oh, Frederick
And a
Douglass is
common destiny.
rolling over in his grave right now at the
This
state of
marvelous
things.
statement was made more than 100 years ago. It's an ideal worth striving for.
An ideal worth striving for is Chandler Remington.
Good morning. Thank
How
you
are
so much for waiting. I'm late, but I'm happy to see you. Oh, I love that hat. That's a good one. I always love seeing your hats.
Well, I always love seeing you.
Oh, I love
Hat or
seeing you too.
no hat.
Hello, chat. Hello, everybody. I've been listening. I turned it off for a little bit. How's he? Apparently, he's doing a lot better than Darden so far.
Well, yeah, he's already done better in like 3 minutes than
That does not surprise me.
and we've got quotes from Cicero, from Abraham Lincoln, from Frederick Douglass, and Marcia Clark. So he's packing it in.
Excellent.
And we're well on our way to introducing the term race card into the lexicon. And
I'm so excited.
If it does not fit, you must acquit.
I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Thankfully, finally, we don't have to be bored to death like we were last week.
I'm already engaged. I'm already ready to sign up to whatever he's selling. And as we've repeatedly, I just love the way he gives you that warm, inviting downspeak. You know, just the soothing. You know, there's no monsters under your bed. Daddy'll take care of them. Don't
Also,
worry.
the tie is fire. I gotta say.
Yeah, it's not the frying pan egg thing that Darden's wearing. But all right,
He wins the tie contest for sure. There's no comparison. He has way more style than Darden does.
let's get it on, shall we?
Let's do it. Yes.
One that we still strive for. We haven't reached this goal yet, but certainly in this great country of ours, we're trying. With a jury such as this, we hope we can do that in this particular case. Now, in this case, you're aware that we represent Mr. Orenthal James Simpson. The prosecution never calls him Mr. Orenthal James Simpson. They call him defendant. I want to tell you right at the outset that Orenthal James Simpson, like all defendants, is presumed to be innocent. He's entitled to the same dignity and respect as all the rest of us. As he sits over there now, he's cloaked in a presumption of innocence. You will determine the facts of whether or not he's set free to walk out those doors or whether he spends the rest of his life in prison. But he's Orenthal James Simpson. He's not just the defendant. And we on the defense are proud, consider it a privilege to have been part of representing him in this exercise and this journey toward justice. Make no mistake about it. Finally, I apologize to you for the length that this journey has taken. But you know, when you're seeking justice, there are no shortcuts. If you were to trade places with either side, you'd want someone who'd fight hard for you and vigorously, especially who was a person who had maintained their innocence from the very beginning of the proceedings. Some of you in voir dire talked about that. You've been involved in other cases where you felt the lawyers didn't stand up. Well, I certainly hope that in this case, on both sides, you felt the lawyers did their best to represent their respective positions, and we will continue, I'm sure, to do that. So that, although I apologize for the length of the trial, I hope and I trust that you will understand.
Just make you want to go,
that
oh, it's
in a
okay, let's go
journey
another year
toward
if you
justice,
talk.
There is no shortcut. Finally, with regard to your responsibilities, we ask you at the very beginning to don't compromise. This is not a case for the timid or the weak of heart. This is not a case for the naive. This is a case for courageous citizens who believe in the Constitution.
Oof.
And while I'm talking about the Constitution, think with me for a moment. How many times you heard my learned adversaries say, the defense didn't prove, the defense didn't do this, the defense didn't do that. Remember, back in voir dire, what did the judge tell us? Judge Ito said the defense could sit here and do absolutely nothing. One of you is from Missouri, and he reminded you, who's from Missouri here? Say to the prosecution, you show us. Now, we didn't do that. But we don't have an obligation, as you'll see. You've heard from the jury's instructions, and at the end, I will show you some.
And with one sentence, he just destroyed the entirety of Chris Darden's closing argument.
Yes.
Because that was literally it. They could have called this person. They didn't. They could have put this on. They said they were going to call this person. Where are they? They didn't do this. It was about 50% that and 50%. I think somebody might have testified something like this. Y'all remember that, right? No.
Darden did a lot of burden shifting, and it was really offensive to me as an Angelino. And I know that I was only, like just walking when I was, when this trial was happening. But seriously, the burden shifting was disgusting. He was like, and they could have done this, and they didn't prove this, and they didn't prove that. And then to counter that, he's like, well, I know we called a lot of really terrible witnesses, but just ignore that, I mean, Darden was just,
we had shitty witnesses too. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And he's like at, like 23% battery, and he's like dwindling lower and lower. And you can just tell he knows that he's lost. So I love that Cochran comes into this with a lot of energy.
And just with that one sentence, the judge told you we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So that cuts Darden's legs out right from under him at the beginning. And speaking of tall people that legs and something, bad segue, can't do it. Nicholas Starr of Trial Watch. Thank you so much for the 50 sexy dollars. As Beavis and Butthead used to say, Cornholio.
Oh, if only I was wearing that kind of shirt, I would like pull it up over the back.
Yeah. I was thinking if I could do that, now I got a hat on. So thank you so much, Nicholas Starro, with our very first super chat of the day, putting us 5% of the way to Doug O'Cam.
I love seeing Nicholas. Nicholas, I'm so happy to see you. I haven't seen you around, buddy. We'll have to collaborate soon. Thank you so much for the super chat. I love when we get super chats, especially for OJ.
Nick's our big giant Viking boy.
And others. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to prove anything. This is the prosecution's burden. And we can't let them turn the Constitution on its head.
Look at Marsha.
We can't let them get away from their burden. My job, one of my jobs, is to remind you of that and to remind them of that that's their burden. They must prove Mr. Simpson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And we will talk about what a reasonable doubt means. And so now, as we have this opportunity to analyze the facts of the case, I agree with one thing that Mr. Darden said. To this task, I ask you to bring your common sense. Collectively, the 14 of you have more than 500 years of experience.
Oof.
I know you're all young, but you multiply by 14, you won't hold that against me, I don't think. 500 years of experience. You didn't leave your common sense out in that hallway when you came in here. And we're going to ask you to apply it to the facts of this case.
He has a gold fringed pocket square.
I'd like to comment.
He's very stylish.
And to compliment Ms. Clark and Mr. Darden
for sucking so badly.
Were fine arguments yesterday.
That handed me this
I don't agree with much of what they said, but I listened intently, as I hope you'll do with me.
Her earrings match his pocket square.
These discussions are going to be helpful to you in trying to arrive at a decision. In this case, when
Could you
don't
look more bored, you
compromise,
idiot?
when you don't do violence to your conscience, but you do the right thing. And you are the ones who are empowered to determine what is the right thing. Let me ask each of you a question. Have you ever in your life been falsely accused of something? Have you ever been falsely accused? Have you had to sit there and take it and watch the proceedings and wait and wait and wait, all the while knowing you didn't do it? All you could do during such a process is to really maintain your dignity. Isn't that correct? Knowing that you were innocent, but maintaining your dignity and remembering always that all you're left with after a crisis is your conduct during it. So that's another reason why we're proud to represent this man who's maintained his innocence and has conducted himself with dignity throughout these proceedings. Now, last night, as I thought about the arguments of my colleagues, two words came to mind. And I asked my wife this morning to get the dictionary out and look up two words. The two words were speculative and cynical. Let me see if I can get those words that she got from me.
Yeah, you know he looked those words up and put them out there like about a year ago.
I asked her.
I love that he's bringing his wife
I was
into it,
thinking
though.
about this case too.
He's a good orator.
Go to Webster's, and I want you to tell me what does it mean to speculate? What does it mean to be cynical? As I thought about my colleagues' arguments and their approach to this case and their view of this case. Cynical is described as
A country
contemptuously
in Africa.
distrustful of human nature and motives,
Sorry.
gloomy, distrustful view of life.
That describes Christopher Darden. Just gloomy and
To
distrustful.
speculate, to engage in conjecture and to surmise, or is to take to be the truth on the basis of insufficient evidence.
He's so much more likable than Darden.
He is.
I mentioned those two definitions to you because I felt that
The wrong
much of
black
what we
lawyer's
heard
dead.
yesterday and again this morning.
The way
It's mere
Darden's sitting there,
speculation.
he looks like
Understand this, ladies
he's in
and
the Swiss
gentlemen,
Alps,
that
and somebody's
none
about
of
to
us
cut
in
off
this
one of his limbs to
courtroom
eat it, and he's just like, all right, go ahead.
were out
I'm
at
done.
875
Wow.
Bundy on June 12th,
Just cannibalize me.
1994, after 10:30 or 10:45 in the evening.
You end of that.
So that everything we say to you is our
Insert
best
eat
effort
jokes here.
to piece together
That's not Maritime Monday.
what took place in this case.
I'm a burrito.
When people theorize about things that may have been and talk to you about short fuses you're going to see, that's just that. It's speculation. People see things that are totally cynical. Maybe that's their view of the world. Not everybody shares that view. Now, in this case, and this is a homicide case and a very, very, very serious case. And of course, it's important for us to understand that. It is a sad fact that in American society, a large number of people are murdered each year. Violence, unfortunately, has become a way of life in America.
And OJ didn't
And so
kill
when
them
this
all.
sort of tragedy does in fact happen, it becomes the business of the police to step up and to step in and to take charge of the matter.
Don't stand so.
A good,
Don't stand
efficient,
so close to
competent, non-corrupt police department will carefully
He's a comedian
set
too.
about the business of investigating homicides. They won't rush to judgment. They won't be bound by an obsession to win at all costs. They will set about trying to apprehend the killer or killers and trying to protect the innocent from suspicion. In this case, the victims' families had an
Oh,
absolute
I
right
am
to
a
demand
dad, though.
exactly just
Daily
that.
Quick
in
Bites.
this
I'm the
case.
father of an
But it was
amazing
clear,
23-year-old
unfortunately, that in
son.
this case, there was another agenda. From the very first orders issued by the LAPD so-called brass.
You're also a law
They're
daddy.
more concerned with their own images, the publicity that might be generated from this case, than they were in doing professional police work. That's why this case has become such a hallmark. And that's why Mr. Simpson is the one on trial. But your verdict in this case will go far beyond the walls of Department 103, because your verdict talks about justice in America, and it talks about the police and whether they're above the law, and it looks at the police perhaps as though they haven't been looked at.
Almost
very recently.
synchronicity.
Remember, I told you, this is not for the naive, the faint of heart, or the timid. So it seems to us that the evidence shows that professional police work took a back seat right at the beginning. Untrained officers trampled. Remember, I used the words in the opening statement. They traipsed through the witness, through the evidence. And it was interesting because the prosecution didn't agree with that at the beginning, but later on in this trial, we heard Mr. Goldberg and talking to witnesses use my words, traipsing through the witness scene. That scene there at Bundy. He used our words because they understood. We knew what we were talking about.
Oof.
We were able to demonstrate it through the videos. They delayed unconscionably.
Now, here, that right there was a little lesson. Prosecution, do not use phrases the defense uses in their case, especially for something like traipsing through the crime scene.
Yes.
And equally, defense, don't use the same phrases that the prosecution uses. Don't do what Chris Darden did. Well, they told you all of these things.
Unless to directly quote them and say, now they said we were traipsing through the crime scene. That was ludicrous. You know, I mean, maybe that's one exception, but otherwise, yes, I agree.
Routine procedures in notifying the coroners. They didn't call the criminalists out on time. And yes, they allowed this investigation to be infected by a dishonest and corrupt detective.
And they can't say shit to rebut this.
And they may try to back away from it all they want, but that's very important, as you're going to see, to this case and the resolution of my client's innocence.
And I agree completely.
I do too.
Because of their bumbling, they ignored obvious clues. They didn't pick up paper at the scene with prints on it. Because of their vanity, they very soon pretended to solve this crime, and we think implicated an innocent man. And they never, ever looked for anyone else.
They also stored all the blood evidence really wonky.
If they'd done their job, as we have done, Mr. Simpson would have been eliminated early on.
Yes, this is closing argument.
Is not, let me say at the outset, is not about attacking the Los Angeles Police Department.
But
we're not anti-police in making these statements. You're not anti-police. We all need the police. I just said we have so much crime in this country, we need the police. But what we need,
you don't have to. Sorry.
What we must demand, what all of us should have, are honest, effective, non-biased police officers. Who could demand less? Can any of you say that's not what we should have? And so let me tell you about how we're going to proceed here this afternoon. The defense has one opportunity basically to address you. This is after the prosecutors are finished. I will address you first. And after I'm concluded, and I will talk generally about the lay witnesses and an overview of the evidence and what you've heard. I'll strive not to bore you. I'll strive to be honest in my discussions, to be relevant, to be concise in what we talk about here. When I'm finished, Mr. Barry Scheck will come before you and address some of the forensic issues. And then finally, after Mr. Scheck finishes, I'll come back and conclude with some concluding remarks regarding what you've heard over the course of the last 2 days at any rate. Now you understand that because the prosecution bears the burden in this case and in all cases, Ms. Clark will argue last. to seek to rebut that which we bring up. And presumably she won't be back up here talking about all kind of new things. Seek to rebut that which we bring up. And let me tell you in front, if she brings up anything, we may be precluded from standing up and saying, wait a minute, Your Honor, here's the answer to that. But you can then substitute your common sense, your judgment in that place. And that's required in this journey toward justice. Now, at the outset, let's talk about this timeline for the defense. I said earlier that Mr. Darden did a good job in his argument. But one thing he tended to trip over and stumble over was when he started to try to talk about our case. He doesn't know our case like we know our case. It was interesting, wasn't it? Because first he stood up and started talking about the timeline being at 10:15. Then he said, well, they didn't prove anything, but golly, well, it may have been as late as 10:30. That's interesting, isn't it? Never heard that before. You look back and see what Ms. Clark promised you a year ago. 10:15. 10:15 was all they talked about. And they were going to use, because of the incompetence of this investigation, the wail of a dog. So we've been relegated to, in this case, because of this very, very poor investigation. But having said the defense doesn't have to prove anything, in this case, we did, in fact. And so Mr. Darden could talk all he wanted to about his theories about motive. They're just that, his speculative theories about motive. But when it came down to the end, he wasn't talking about motive, was he? He was trying to talk about our timeline. Why would he do that? Let's talk about why he would. Because the defense in this case called many witnesses who corroborate each other and who shatter the prosecution's timeline. Now, these are witnesses to a person who were known by the prosecution, but discarded by the prosecution. Why? Because they didn't fit their tortured, narrow window of opportunity. So when you would visualize for me that jigsaw puzzle, where they want to reduce this case down to a jigsaw puzzle, the part that deals with opportunity is the timeline. And we're going to start off with that, because in a search for truth, let's look for the truth. Not some contorted, twisted truth, but the real truth, the facts that you've heard during the course of this particular case.
I hate to hate to interrupt it here, but I just wanted to say something. We're talking about the Turkish prison. Joey, have you ever been in a Turkish prison? That line from Airplane, and we're not totally far afield because Naked Gun had Leslie Nielsen, and Leslie Nielsen was in Airplane, and OJ Simpson was in Naked Gun. So it's kind of all tied together. But Ryan Macron was saying that his entire life, he didn't realize that was a reference to, I'm sorry, that wasn't that. Sorry, that's a different question. Red Ford was saying he didn't realize that was a reference to Papillon. Papillon was actually in French Guyana. It wasn't the Steve McQueen movie it was based on. It was based on Midnight Express. Oh. About a guy that was sentenced to a Turkish prison for drugs. And that's also where the cable guy line, "Oh Billy," came from. That was also from Midnight Express. Yeah, so it's a reference to Midnight Express.
We always end up talking about movies when we stream OJ. I don't know exactly why.
Because he's an actor.
Well, yes, there's that. I mean, he's a football player, but also an actor. Yes.
Yes. So
you look at this timeline for the defense, you will agree with our early analysis. This is a case about a rush to judgment, a case where there's been an obsession to win at all costs. And in the words of Dr. Henry Lee, something is wrong with the prosecution's case.
One or two
Let's
things.
start off with Francesca Harmon. Francesca Harmon is the lady who left the dinner party on Dorothy at about 10:20 p.m. She drove west on Dorothy and Bundy and turned north on Bundy. So she'd be heading north toward 875. She saw nothing, heard nothing, no barking dogs. It's a lady known, of course, to both sides. And so you see this graphic regarding Francesca Harmon. And I think to familiarize you with that, I think at 10:20, so I understand that's the approximate time that she would pass by or near Nicole Brown Simpson's home there. Oh, you see it with the X mark there in this graphic. That's Miss Harmon. We followed Francesca Harmon with Ellen Aronson and Dan Mandel. Remember the two people who'd been on their first date? They'd gone to Metzaluna. And they were interesting young people. I think you would find them credible. And by the
Nick
way,
Lestara,
you
OJ's
hold all
character
witnesses
opening
up to the
scene in
same
the
standard.
Naked Gun 2.5
No
was
side
less
has a priority
stumbly
on
than
the
the
truth.
prosecution.
These are witnesses
Solid.
known to
Thank
both
you,
sides.
Nicholas. Thank you.
We're the ones, however, who elected
Marcia's
to
doing
call
her
them and
neck
bring them here for you.
exercises.
Yeah.
You know how they walked home from this first date at Metzaluna, walking directly by the walkway at 875 South Bundy. And they said they passed by there. Remember, they were clear. They passed by there at 10:25. And you'll see the little kind of purple lines. Shows you the route they took.
Purple
So
line.
they passed right in front of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's home at 10:25. And you remember, they continued on. So they were over on Darlington Street.
I don't get that reference.
10:29. She said that it took them
What?
about
I don't
4
get that
minutes
reference.
from the time
Blurred
they passed
lines.
875
Come
Oh,
on.
South
blurred
Bundy
lines. Oh, got
to
it.
get
Purple
home that
lines.
evening. This was their first date, and I guess,
Give
as I
me
recall, this was
purple
also their last date.
lines.
It's like really early here.
I
They saw no blood. They saw no barking dogs. I submit to you, if the bodies had been there, they could have been seen.
Chocolate
Now,
rain.
why do I say that? I say that because we have a
Earworm.
contact print in evidence. And I'm going to ask Mr.
Chocolate
Harris, if you can,
to
show us this contact print. This is an item you'll be able to take back in the jury room. This is a photograph taken by Mr. Rokar at night. And it will let you see, Mr. Harris gets it focused.
Come on,
scene
Mr.
that
Harris.
particular night, what you could see with regard to this body, and Your Honor, you may want to cut the feed on part of this. $33, Howard. And this exhibit is what number, Mr. Do you have it? I believe it may be 86. I'll get it for you as soon as he takes it off, Your Honor. Now, this exhibit, and we'll try to give them to you, Your Honor, just when we first get them up there.
Thank you.
This exhibit number 86 was a photograph that we got later in the trial.
Chocolate rain.
Mr. Rokar, the photographer, was called by us. You see that document over there? That's a contact sheet. Remember, he talked about all of these photographs in sequence in this first roll were taken at night. This is going to be a very, very important role for you as this case progresses. This is a photograph at night of what you could see from across the street, and there were lights in and around there. And so when Mr. Darden stands up here as an advocate and tells you it was pitch black and you couldn't see anything, this is the photograph that was taken before the sun came up. This photograph was taken at night. It's not pitch black. We know also that according to the evidence, blood had flown down that walkway. There were bloody paw prints that went southbound on Bundy there. So you see that photograph? You see that photograph? Now you can be an advocate, and we're all sworn to do the right thing. We talked about his oath. The oath is also to tell the truth. It's not pitch black. We have the evidence. And I'm going to try to do that throughout. Where they have misled you or not said things that weren't correct, I'm going to try to straighten it out for you. Mr. Harris, why don't you tell the court now what that number is? It's number 1369, and that's Mr. Rokar. We're going to come back to some other photographs on that, but you'll recall his testimony. And the reason why 1369 is so important is because it is undisputed that at 1025, Mandel and Aronson walked past there. If there was blood down on that sidewalk, if there had been a killing had taken place, if there were dogs barking or wailing, don't you think, given that, You've been out there.
Oh, Island, I
You've seen-
just did. Too early, need
The
doggo
time has
status
come
update.
now to
90
stop
away,
all
now
this
88 away.
folly and fantasy. Let's deal in reality and in the facts of what took place and what you can see with your own eyes. I don't want you to speculate or theorize. When I sit down, I want you to understand what the facts are of this case.
He's just so much
Mr.
more engaging with
Harris,
this
you can take
jury.
that down. After that, we had Denise Pilnack and Judy Tillander. And I think, again, as advocates, we have a responsibility to treat all of these witnesses with respect. These people didn't ask to come down here. These people don't ask to be maligned. I don't think anybody really wants that, with the exception of one or two. And most of them were called by the prosecution. So when Denise Pilnack, lady who wore 2 watches, comes in here and tells you, I ask you to judge her credibility like you do all the witnesses. The court has instructed you. You hold all witnesses up to the same standard. You look at the reasonableness of what they have to say. You look at their bias or interest. You look at their demeanor on the stand. You use your common sense. You use your visceral reaction, if I can use that word, to make a determination of whether or not you think this person is telling you the truth. None of these people know or knew OJ Simpson. With the exception of the people who are together, they don't know each other. They're witnesses.
Nah, nobody would ever donate if we did that.
But in the search for truth, we're the ones who subpoenaed them and brought them in.
Maybe $50 and they'll
at
turn
Denise
my
Pilnack.
camera off. Maybe that'd help.
She
get money
tells you
faster.
that she was at home with her friend Judy Tillander.
No, don't do
She's
that.
across the street from
I can't
875
see you.
South Bundy. She's south and across the street. You recall that. She
I like
spoke
looking at you.
of how eerily quiet. Remember those words? It was at about 10:24 p.m. when Tillander left her house. And she remembered
Zoolander.
that because she wanted to get Tillander out of there. She'd been there all day and she wanted to use a computer or something to type some letters. Remember that? So she went outside on the porch with Tillander, as I recall. And Pilnack just didn't come to you and tell you that. Pilnack did something else. She, and I believe, Your Honor, that's Exhibit 1237. She showed us the phone record, Your Honor.
My secret is I go to
She
bed at 5
showed us
p.m.
that she got on the phone as soon as Pilnack left and called her mother. Remember, she said, in Gardena.
Telephone is
there on June
ringing.
12th
And mother on the phone.
At 10:25 p.m. She
More
made a
police
call to
references?
Gardena.
Absolutely
She was able
love
to
police.
fix
It's
the
almost
exact
like we're
time
working together in
that
synchronicity.
her friend left. And she said to us something very interesting,
I'll shut up.
that there was quiet when her friend left, and the quiet continued for at least another 10 minutes. So that would be 10:25 to 10:35 at the earliest. She says that at 10:35, it's the first time she heard dogs barking loudly that particular night. And so that she, as you will see, along with Robert Heidstra, confirm each other. They don't necessarily know each other, but they confirm each other.
The tie.
as
I
to
want that
when
tie.
this barking really began. Now, they weren't laying in bed and had been asleep like Eva Stein. They weren't like Miss Elsie Testert, who's across the street, who didn't really know what was happening. These are people who are either outside or in that area who can come in here and tell you why they remember these particular times. They were wide awake, up and about, outside, around the time.
Bradley Sugars
when this
asked what
barking
proportion of the jury
took
was
place.
black.
Like
At the,
Then we call
at
this
the
man
end, there
Robert
was
Heidstra.
8 blacks, 2 Hispanics, 1
You know,
half
'cause
Caucasian.
it came out that Robert Heidstra had been talking
and
to the
1
prosecution.
Caucasian female.
And it was
what he
mostly
said.
female
Now,
black
this is the man
women.
who's an interesting man who details cars. He's the man who
Female women.
is well known to the prosecution.
Well, you have to
And he
clarify
talked
those
to
things
Detective
these days.
Payne
You do.
almost right away during the investigations to Payne. And he told Payne the same thing he told you.
Yeah,
the
that's
course of
not a
this trial.
DKNY tie.
Here's what he said. He says that he lives nearby. And he has these 2 elderly dogs, one of whom I recall was 14 years of age. And so these dogs walk kind of slowly. Remember that? He walks and he takes this route. And that graphic up there shows you the route he takes. Let me tell you, he left home a little bit late that particular Sunday evening. So 10:15, he leaves home.
So everybody is walking around the
proceeds on
neighborhood
this
when these
roof.
murders occurred.
And you know he's in that alleyway that runs parallel with Bundy.
It's a nice
He
neighborhood.
knows this neighborhood. He's been doing this for more than 14 years. He knows not only the neighborhood, he knows the dogs, he knows their barks, he knows the gates, he knows when they clank, he knows all of that. And isn't it an interesting situation? When you thought that of all the witnesses in this trial, in this journey toward justice, this is the only witness who ever heard any voices. But they didn't call him. You know why? Because it doesn't fit in their timeline, as you're going to see. And so,
See, this is the good thing. He chastises the prosecution at the beginning for saying that the defense didn't call witnesses and didn't put on a case, etc. I mean, didn't prove this or didn't prove that. He calls the prosecution out for doing that. And then he rightly gets to call out the prosecution for not calling people, because it's the prosecution that has the burden of calling people and proving things. So that's a good double backhand. That's just like pow, and then he crosses over with the other one. I like that he gets to call out the prosecution for not doing shit, and they can't say we don't have the burden to do that. Good on him.
he tells you that, and you recall, he's directly opposite Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's condo in that alley when he hears what he believes is the Akita start barking. And that's at about 10:35 p.m.
Cato the dog, not Cato the
He
person.
recognizes, he says, the Akita's bark since he walks that way, that same way,
Walk
each
this
and
way,
every evening.
bark that way.
So while in that alleyway, east
That
of
wasn't Cato the
875
dog.
South Bundy,
It was a
there's a
different dog,
voice yell. Hey, hey, hey.
wasn't
He
it?
says he then hears
Gabba
a
gabba
gate
hey.
slam.
It was them.
Now he goes on and says that at about 10:40, 10:45, he sees this white vehicle, which he describes clearly as a van or a Jeep. Now they were trying to tell you all these things about it being some Bronco, but he never said anything about any Bronco. He said a van or a Jeep. And the important part was, it's what he tells the detective, but he says it goes southbound on Bundy, away from where Mr. Simpson would live. And could you imagine in this area, in West Los Angeles, in Brentwood, the number of white vehicles there are and must be in that particular area? But the reason why they didn't call him was because at 10:45, OJ Simpson cannot be guilty of this crime, can he? Now, how do we know that? How do we know that, ladies and gentlemen? Well, yesterday, in her zeal and advocacy, Ms. Clark tried to push the time back from 10:40
She's
to
smirking.
10:45 that Cato heard those thumps.
I love they
She
close up
tried
on
in her
face.
chart there to push it back, remember, to 10:53. Some of you probably were surprised. There's been no testimony about that. So let me tell you, let me quote for you. Counsel, this is page 19873. This is Ms. Clark talking to one of her favorite witnesses, Mr. Cato Kalin. By Ms.
She's got to
Clark.
stop laughing like that.
And what happened with that picture when the thumps occurred?
Not a good look.
Picture tilted from, that would be right to left. The picture moved. Answer, yes, it did. At that point that you heard the thumps on the wall, sir, approximately how long had you been on the phone with Rachel Ferraro? Remember, he called his friend, called his girlfriend. About a half hour. So after he went back in the house, he called his girlfriend. And so approximately what time was it when you heard the thumps on the wall? Answer by Mr. Kalin, at about 10:40. At about 10:40. Now this is the time when the dogs first start to bark over there. About 10:40. Is that exact 10:40, Ms. Clark says? Well, what I remember, I didn't look at the clock, but around 10:40. Question, do you recall previously testifying that it was 10:40 to 10:45? Answer, yes. Question, okay, and is that correct? Answer, yes. Now, that's their witness. That's their witness. That's what he has to say. There's no question he's there. They know he's there. You know he's there. They don't call him. What about this search for truth? Can they handle the truth?
You can't handle the
You're
truth.
making that kind of decision. And so We then know, according to this, that by the time Hydra sees this vehicle turn south on Bundy,
The dogs are right here.
has
next to
already
me.
heard
I can
the
hear.
3 thumps on the Rockingham wall outside of his room. And you know, that's so interesting because yesterday, Ms. Clark tried to change how those thumps sounded. Now, remember, this is something that you will never forget, probably. I won't come all the way over there, but let me just see if I can duplicate. Kato Kalin said, here's how he said those thumps sounded. 1, 2, 3. Except he used that place up there. So they were thumps, almost like a signal. 1, 2, 3. That's what he had to say. And of course,
Not
you recall
3
that.
times on the
Your notes are
wall
much
if
better
you
than ours,
killed
I'm
me.
sure. Apparently, the prosecution, in their zeal and their obsession to win, would have you believe that Mr. Orenthal James.
Oh, now she's doing way too much of this smirking, smiling, eye rolling, forehead wrinkling shit.
Poker
here.
face, Marsha. Come on.
I mean, she's just got this constant. It's looking bad. It's distracting me.
James Simpson is so amazing that he can be in 2 places at the same time, even though they're miles apart. And when Darden was talking to you today, everybody used Heitzer to say, well, on a Sunday evening, you could make it over there in about 4 minutes. And he said that? Well, in their own drive through that Van Adder did, took between 5 and 6 minutes. You saw it. Took close to 6 minutes. He didn't tell you that again today. And if you want to get a flavor for how, we heard the word desperate a couple times, but how witnesses were treated, just ordinary witnesses, regular citizens. Let me share with you a transcript regarding Heitster.
Oh, you know it's about that.
Counsel, I'm going to be looking at 36368.
See, I love that they're quoting
36370.
from the record, not doing this. Well, you might
This is how
remember
Mr.
that I
Darden
think this guy is what
treated
said
this witness who helped to shatter their timeline and establish OJ Simpson's innocence. Didn't you tell us yesterday that the voice was a youthful voice? Yeah, it sounded like a young voice. Okay. And when you heard that voice, you thought that that was the voice of a young white male, didn't you? And there was an objection, you may recall. The voice sounded like the voice of a white male, Mr. Darden said. Answer, how could I say that it is a white male? I don't know the voice. It could be anybody there. Question, did you ever tell Mr. Stevens, my investigator, that it sounded like a white male? Answer, no. Never saw Mr. Stevens come in here and say that. Never said that? Answer, I don't recall that at all. I said it was a clear voice, but never what kind of white or brown or yellow. And then there was that second voice, correct? Right. And that second voice, that voice sounded deeper than the first voice, didn't it? Answer, a little bit, but I couldn't hardly hear it with the dogs, the commotion with 2 dogs there. It was very short. Did you ever tell anyone that the second voice was a deep voice? Answer was deep. It was deeper than the other one, then hey, hey, hey. Okay, then we get to the question.
Sorry, that was bad. I can't do a deep voice.
Line 22, counsel. The second voice that you heard sounded like the voice of a black man. Is that correct? Objection. Witness, of course not. Now, you know, we can be advocates. Those questions, nobody ever came in to impeach that man. He told you he heard 2 voices. He told you when this took place. He told you why, because he walks his dogs. He knows that neighborhood. A search for truth, you see, their job is not to just try to convict. Their job as prosecutors is to make sure the innocent go free also, to make sure all the witnesses come to your attention, as we've had to do in this case. So you can see that these responsible citizen witnesses who came before you were oftentimes treated roughly and ridiculed and attacked by the prosecution in their obsession to win. You don't think Heister was attacked? Remember, he was asked the question, something to the effect, are you a citizen here? Because he's from France, apparently. And something about his job and his little apartment, because he's a car detailer. Everybody is entitled to dignity. That's what we fought for in this country. You don't treat witnesses who just come in here, they don't get paid to tell the truth like that.
Unless it's Effley Bailey making fun of Mark Furman's tiny little flashlight
version of what the truth ought to be. But you saw that yourself. I don't have to tell you about it. Interestingly enough, they chose not to mention even one of the defense witnesses in Ms. Clark's discussion of her timeline. The prosecutors noted that none of their timeline witnesses asked to be involved in this case. Well, none of the witnesses that we call asked to be involved in this case. They came forward. You saw how they were treated, but yet they told you what they observed. But perhaps the most important thing about them is these aren't any family members. These aren't people who know OJ Simpson. These are just people who happen to be out there that particular night. And I think you can now see from that graphic how they all passed by there. We tried to make it as clear as we could. It's common sense. It's common sense, just like he said. It becomes very, very clear.
It makes no sense.
So if you accept the prosecution scenario, there's not enough time for OJ Simpson to commit these murders, given the evidence that we understand. Let me just succinctly at the beginning help you understand where I'm going on this. Remember Bodziak, they like to talk about so much? Effley Bailey cross-examined Bodziak the first time he was here. Remember Bailey got him to say this remarkable thing about whoever left out that back gate turned and went back the other way. It's pretty interesting because I didn't see all those prints, but that's what he says. They went back to the scene. Remember that? That's what Bodziak said. Darden said this morning, the killer or killers that went that way, they weren't in any hurry. They went that way and then came back. You take that along with the fact that the credible evidence regarding this struggle is it took between 5 to 15 minutes. And that's what Dr. Henry Lee, Dr. Michael Batten said. They not only told you that, they showed you why that was true. You know, while I'm about it, just to digress for just a moment, Mr. Darden talked this morning about calling witnesses and not calling witnesses. Isn't that interesting? Now, they're the prosecutors. They are the ones who have the burden. In the history of man runneth not to the contrary. Nobody around here can remember any time that the coroner who did the autopsy, the actual autopsies on these bodies, wasn't called by these prosecutors. Why do you think that was? They didn't call the coroner.
I like how he's leaning into the jury.
They chose instead
Me too.
to call Dr. Lakshmanan, who came
Everything
in
about
here.
his body language is
They showed you what they thought about him. They talked about this man so badly. I mean, for 8 days, we heard Dr. Lakshmanan talk to you. They talk about length of time in this trial. Let me put that in perspective for you. For 8 days, Lakshmanan sat on that stand and went through direct examination by Brian Kilberg. Check your notes if you think I'm wrong about that. Bob Shapiro got up and took 3.5 hours
you remember.
and demolished him because at the end of the day, Lakshmanan told you this. Well, these were deaths that were caused by stab wounds. And the time of death was between 9 and 12. Remember all those discussions about big ticket items and big ticket items? And when you get back in the jury room, you'll have a lot of fun trying to figure out all those red and blue marks that they drew all over the corners. They spent 8 days trashing their own coroner. And they didn't call him. Now, why is that in this search for truth? They call somebody else who's not even there at the autopsies, who has the benefit of our experts, Michael Batten and Barbara Wolf, who point out to him the mistakes that Golden has made. He then runs in here and testifies about those mistakes that we had discovered. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, in this search for truth, our experts were in place right away. OJ Simpson was paying for these experts to find the killer or killers. And you'll recall the evidence that Dr. Lee, Michael Batten, Barbara Wolf were offered to them at the beginning. So the idea is that from the beginning, there was this search for truth. So I mentioned that parenthetically at this point because I think it's important.
I was thinking the same thing, Katie. We're on the same wavelength.
Every murder case,
Baba Wawa?
it's basic that you got to call the
My
coroner.
favorite. Oh, Gilda
But they
Radner.
did a number of
Best.
things in this case, ladies and gentlemen, that had never been seen before.
Hey, could
Some
be
of
on
our
a golf
hits.
course in Florida. You're never
Or
sure.
detectives going to the scene to notify somebody who's not even the next of kin. The detective carries blood 25 or 30 miles around in his pocket. They do things that you have never heard of before. In this case, is it because it's Orenthal James Simpson? And so as we look then at the timeline and the importance of this timeline, I want you to remember these words. Like the defining moment in this trial, the day Mr. Darden asked Mr. Simpson to try on those gloves and the gloves didn't fit. Remember these words.
Oh,
If it doesn't fit,
oh,
you must acquit.
oh, there we go.
We're talking about that
Woo.
throughout.
There we go.
So to summarize, if you take the witnesses who we presented, who stand unimpeached,
Should we listen to it again?
and if you are left with dogs starting to bark at 10:35 or 10:40, let's say, and we know from the most qualified individuals, Henry Lee and Michael Batten, this was a struggle that took from 5 to 15 minutes. It's already 10:55. And remember, the thumps were at 10:40 or 10:45. OJ Simpson could not be guilty. He is then entitled to an acquittal. And we have talked to you, and you've heard from the court, and my colleagues talked to you about this whole idea of circumstantial evidence. I want to talk to you a little more about that now. We've shown you the incredible evidence that it would be impossible. OJ could not, would not, did not commit these crimes. And where you have a circumstantial evidence case, this becomes very, very important. The prosecution then must disprove our timeline beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they don't, you must acquit. He would then be entitled to an acquittal. So let's see if we can look quickly at this jury instruction, sufficiency of circumstantial evidence generally. Mr. Douglas is going to help me today. Have just a second here.
Certainly.
Now, in both places, you can see this instruction. It's called sufficiency of circumstantial evidence, evidence generally. And to be as accurate as possible, let me allude to all of it, lest I favor one portion or the other, and together we can consider it. This is the law that His Honor has already given you as relates to circumstantial evidence, which this is in this case, about opportunity to commit these crimes. However, a finding of guilt as to any crime may not be based on circumstantial evidence unless the proved circumstances are not only, one, consistent with the theory that the defendant is guilty of the crime, but two, cannot be reconciled with any other rational conclusion. Further, each fact, which is essential to complete a set of circumstances necessary to establish the defendant's guilt, must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, before an inference essential to establish guilt may be found to have been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, each fact or circumstance upon which such inference necessarily rests must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Also, if the circumstantial evidence as to any particular count, either one of these counts, is susceptible of two reasonable interpretations, one of which points to guilt, the other which points to innocence, you, as jurors, must adopt that interpretation which points to the defendant's innocence and reject that interpretation which points to his guilt.
I think he got him
If,
here.
on the other hand, one interpretation of such evidence appears to you to be reasonable and the other interpretation to be unreasonable, you must accept the reasonable interpretation and reject the unreasonable. I put that up at this very moment because you've just seen the timeline, which is circumstantial evidence of OJ Simpson's innocence because he couldn't have done the crime given this time. So under that scenario, even if the prosecution's timeline was reasonable, if they're both reasonable, I think you must agree ours is reasonable, it becomes your duty to adopt that which points towards innocence. But even further, if theirs is unreasonable and ours is reasonable, entitled to an acquittal.
Sorry, Chewbacca
Only
defense.
way
You're just trying to wake me up.
they're entitled to conviction. Ours is unreasonable and theirs
Wait.
is reasonable. And I think you can see and understand that's not true. That shouldn't happen.
If y'all acquit,
That's not the facts
get
of
a
this
whoopee
case.
cookie.
So before I look at their timeline, let me just see if I can summarize what I believe the prosecution has tried to tell you about their theory in this case. And this is just kind of rough, but listening to them yesterday, they tried to tell you that an insanely jealous man stalks his ex-wife, stabs her and a male visitor in a murderous rage, leaves a trail of blood to his home, barely catches a plane for Chicago, in a rush to go there, leaves one glove at the murder scene and one glove behind his house.
Sure, that
In
happened.
the defense of this case, you have heard evidence about OJ Simpson's great life. Not only was he have a great life, he had a great day that day. Playing golf, comes back from being out of town all week long, comes back to go to his child's recital. He goes to that recital, prepares in the evening, gets something to eat, a hamburger. By the way, I have to stop at this point. I'm glad Miss Clark doesn't know this, but you know, if you've ever been to McDonald's, they don't like you to bring $100 bills in there. You know, you can't get $100 bills changed there generally. So some of these things about common sense, some people don't know.
Beyond the evidence here.
A little bit, yeah.
Proceed.
Use your common sense about fast food places. He then takes a shower, barely catches his plane in Chicago. Someone murders his wife and this male visitor for reasons unknown in this trial. Others seek to implicate him as the most obvious suspect. The investigation becomes a tragic combination of sloppy errors and cover-ups to try and achieve his conviction. Those are going to be pretty much the hypothesis that you've heard and will be hearing in this case. Under whatever scenario, based on what I've already told you in this first hour of the argument, this man is entitled to an acquittal. But let's now turn briefly the prosecution's timeline scenario. And you heard Ms. Clark yesterday talk about this timeline and talk about these witnesses, and she relies very heavily on this Pablo Fenves. You remember him, he's one of the early witnesses who started off, I think, talking about a plaintiff whale of a dog at 10:30, and he got pushed back to 10:15. But it's interesting because now Darden, not Marcia Clark, has now come back and conceded, well, you know, maybe it really was later. They did a pretty good job. You know, so he's saying that. But Fenves told us that he, you know, he's in that alleyway, down the alleyway and across from Nicole Brown Simpson lives. 10:15, 10:30, whatever, 10:20. Eva Stein, next door, was asleep. Claims she was awakened. You ever wake up at night? You might see the time right, you might not. She says about 10:20 or so, she thinks she hears dogs barking. Well, I presume the dogs bark throughout that neighborhood all the time. We don't know, and that's the problem. We're trying to convict somebody or set the time of death by a dog barking.
Dogs bark at
Louis
vacuums. I
Karp,
mean, they're not.
her boyfriend
you know.
comes home sometime after 10:20. And then, of course, Miss Elsie Tistert, the lady from across the street, doesn't know when or what was precisely when she heard the barks. Then there's Mark Storfer. And Mark Storfer is an interesting man because you remember he's the man who always set his watch 5 minutes fast, he says, presumably. He told us here in testimony, counsel, 17190, says at 10:28 is when I looked at the TV, which was a couple of minutes after I'd gotten in the room, right? Okay. And then he talks about, I looked out the window of our bedroom that faces North Bundy to see if I could see where that dog was or what was going on. It was pretty dark and I couldn't see anything unusual and I couldn't locate the dog.
You can hear my dog, so you can locate them. They're right over here snoring.
Oh, I can hear him from a mile
if
away.
the dog was further over to the west. We faced the alley on the west side,
From separate,
and I could not see anything at that time either.
Always.
Now, this witness becomes kind of important, doesn't he? Because the prosecution is going to tell you that no matter what time it is, whether it's 10:40 or 10:45, or whether it's 10:15 or 10:20 or 10:25, or Mr. Darden makes this big quantum leap. The Bronco was there. Where's Mark Storfer, who looks down that alley, and what exhibit is this, Mr. Harris? Do we know? Exhibit number 38, Your Honor. This is looking northbound down that alleyway. And you recall this because we've all been out there, and you'll recall where Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's condo is located. And you recall that it's sitting out in the driveway there.
See, they should have gone. They should have gone down to the In-N-Out on Wilshire, man.
Jeep Cherokee,
None of this
as I
would have
recall.
happened.
Wilshire and
You
what?
see, this man can presumably look up this
No,
alleyway.
Wilshire Boulevard.
He doesn't
Wilshire
see
and
any
what?
I
white
don't know.
Bronco.
I don't think there's an
Somebody ever
In-N-Out
tells
in
you about
Wilshire.
any white Bronco parked back there?
There is.
Didn't tell you about any car.
There's like a
parked back
motel.
there.
It's in the like.
So when you
attached to a
see people
motel.
tell you about mountains of evidence and oceans of evidence,
At least it
their
was there like
oceans soon
25
become
years ago.
little streams. Their mountains become molehills when you look
I
at the
know my
facts.
In-N-Out burgers, and I know
So
LA.
we go on. In addition to Mark Storfer and looking up that alley and
Around Washington?
seeing nothing or seeing no car or doesn't see a dog,
Let's see.
we hear about the other witnesses who become pretty much part of the timeline. Ms. Clark does take some licenses regarding time. She says that Mr. Goldman leaves Mezzaluna, she says about 9:50 p.m. Says he goes home and he changes clothes, that he talked to Stuart Tanner about getting together later that evening. Remember that? Talked about going to Baja Cantina out at the marina. You know, wouldn't you think it would be logical to expect if you worked all day, when you went home to change clothes, you might have showered, you might have gotten something to eat. Especially if later on, when you hear Mr. Scheck, you look at the amount of food, undigested food that was still in the stomach of these two victims. But in a rush to judgment, in a rush to contort these facts, Ms. Clark tells you yesterday, let's give him 5 minutes. He's been working all day. He's got to change clothes. He's got to come home. Let's give him 5 minutes or
There's
10
no
minutes.
In-N-Out on Wilshire, Jeff. It
Let's
doesn't
give him 10
exist.
minutes. That seems to me to be really, really fast. And what
Used
it
to be.
really is, ladies and gentlemen, is
There's
more
one
of
in
that
Washington. It might be near Wilshire.
She doesn't know. how
Yeah,
long
just
Mr.
thinking.
Goldman
There's
was there.
That's why you didn't hear
None
me
of us
say
know that.
Washington. I said
You
Washington
know,
about
he
2
changed
minutes ago.
clothes.
Right, but it's on Washington. It's not on
Yeah,
Wilshire.
yeah.
I'm just being smartass.
So you understand that.
Yeah, it
when
used to
you
be.
look at when
it
somebody says
used to be
something like that to
there
you.
near this. I think it moved to. There's also one on
And then as
Daly.
part of their
Yeah, that's the
timeline,
one
she tells you
where I went to
yesterday
Yeah.
school.
there's
I'd go there at
something
like 1 in the
sinister
morning.
and
Love
Mr.
that one.
Simpson seeking change
and that's close to
by a
Wilshire.
Big Mac from
It's down the
McDonald's.
street from my dorm. It's close, but no
I
cigar.
suppose that if you're in this jealous rage, if the fuse is running so short,
Oh,
Simpson
short
is
fuse.
making
We're
stop,
back to the trial.
Go get a hamburger at McDonald's.
Damn it!
I love it.
We're
Does
in
it
an
make any sense
burger.
to any of you? Does it make any sense to you to drive to McDonald's? And there's no evidence that he tried to tell Kato Kalin not to come. The evidence is that these two men got in the Bentley and went to McDonald's. The evidence is that while OJ Simpson is in this murderous rage, he's worried about money to tip the skycaps at the airport because he has $100 bills. So
Liz, we're going to be
$20.
watching that. Check back in
Okay,
with
okay.
us if you're going there. If you're
So
going to
you
be
know
at that
about
trial on the hearing on the 29th, check in with us real time.
$20. Then Cato Kalin wants to go get something to eat. And Ms. Clark says they could have gone to a restaurant. Well, you could do anything, I suppose. But the facts are they went to McDonald's to get a hamburger. OJ Simpson ate the hamburger. Presumably, he was hungry. Now, what's sinister about that? Unless you're cynical in your view totally of this case.
Of course, email me.
Cato Kalin, their witness.
Cato.
They called him. They turned on him.
And
You
he became a
observed him.
hostile witness.
I ask you to hold him up to the
They
same standards.
Turned
you do
on
all
him
the other
just like
witnesses.
Cato
But
the
I ask you-
Akita turned on him.
Don't misquote him. Tell the truth about
Dr.
what he had to
Snitch.
say. And so when he says 1040 or 1040 to 1045, don't try to make it 1052. So if you believe in this prosecution's theory, there's this blood leading down to this rear walkway. And Ms. Clark told us yesterday and unveiled her theory. Here's what they ask you to believe. OJ Simpson comes home from these brutal murders in a Bronco.
M.
But he
Young
must be
for the
driving awfully
dogs.
fast to get
Inching
back
us
in this
closer.
time frame.
We're about 84 away now,
He
83.
parks his Bronco out there, the Rockingham gate, somehow gets in the gate, gets down the side of his house, and what does she tell you? He bumps into the air conditioning. Now let's examine that for a minute. The evidence is that OJ Simpson has lived at this house for 17 years. Who do you think knows this place better or the best of all? This is his estate. This is where he lives.
Was he
This is where he's
clumsy?
raised his children.
I bump into
This is
shit all
where
the
he's
time.
married. This is where he had 2 marriages. He knows this place.
I'll be right
as
back.
part of their fantasy, their theory, their speculation, they have OJ Simpson walking down this walkway, running into an air conditioning.
Now it's just
Well, he ran
us.
into the air conditioning. Where's all the bruises that he got from running the air conditioning? Where's the
Gotcha.
sound that he made? That doesn't make any sense. You see,
Do black people bruise?
the reason why they come up with this running into the air conditioning,
I have no idea.
you can't say he climbed over the fence because there's too much
Sorry
shrubbery
to
in it.
offend you
Not
with your
broken.
channel.
I really don't know if he could climb over the fence with this arthritis. But they have him then walking down this walkway, bumping into the air conditioning. But ladies and gentlemen, you know, we're talking about common sense here. Bumping into the air conditioning, and then he just leaves. Is that what happens? And let's look at this. Thank you, Mr. Douglas. You all remember.
You can
this
bump into
one-
stuff
what is
without
it? What is it,
bruising.
Mr. Douglas? Excuse me.
I mean, I'm anemic, so I bruise easily, but not everybody
I'll
bruises
stand over
easily.
here so I won't be in your way.
Good questions, though. Good questions.
Thank you.
I like Cochran's closing so far. He's much more engaging.
Under this scenario, under their scenario, while Allen Park is out here somewhere looking over in this direction, they have OJ Simpson rushing back, parking the Bronco out here, and somewhere or other, he gets all the way down here. Remember, Furman told you how far that was. Gets all the way down here where this air conditioning is, out here by Cato Kalin's room. You'll see
Great
this right
lesson.
here. They have him running into this air conditioning, so he doesn't know his own house. And
I
he's
asked do
all the way
black
back
people
here.
bruise.
She says the reason
I
he's
know your
back here
channel.
is because he's going to go
Nice.
back here and he's going to bury the knife in the clothes. Now, isn't that something? How does she know that? Just make that up out of whole cloth? Do you believe that's reasonable? Is that reasonable to you? Does anybody on this jury believe that? That's what you were told yesterday. He runs in this air conditioning and then just, you know, he bumps into it and he drops his glove. That's what she told you.
Oh,
Doesn't make any sense at all. Here's it, ladies and gentlemen.
is me getting my channel
Doesn't make any
heated
sense at
again?
all. No sound from Cato Kalin. And then what kind of, you know, the sound.
No, I'm getting
is
your channel
always
heated.
very
It's my
confusing.
fault.
Maybe not to you, but to me. And Cato Kalin goes, it's more like a signal than anything else. Come out here or whatever.
But why would he
Those
be
are the facts
signaling Cato,
of
though?
Cato Kalin and what happened. And that's her theory. That's her reasonable, rational theory that you have to buy into, which I think that you will find to be totally ridiculous.
No, I don't ask
Remember,
black people
down
can
this
feel their
same way,
hair. It's
there's a
ridiculous.
door into that side room there. Mr. Simpson wanted to get in his house. What would stop him from going in that side door? Who knows his house better? He wanted to be not be seen. I'm supposed that he would know better than anybody else. Doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense.
What they're now trying to tell you. And here's something else that's equally implausible. She tells you that the reason why Mr. Simpson couldn't stop and hide these clothes is because he's too famous and too well known. Remember that? She said OJ Simpson is too famous and too well known to stop and try to hide clothes or whatever that nature. Well, let's take that just a little bit further. Part of what makes their theory so ridiculous is it is OJ Simpson going to get in a white Bronco that's well known in Brentwood, drive over to his ex-wife's house, park the Bronco in this well-lit alleyway that you've just seen, leave the car there, everybody knows him, knows that car. That's equally preposterous. So you can't have it both ways. He's too famous to stop and try to throw things in a dumpster, the way she put it. Isn't he equally too famous to be driving this car to go over there under these circumstances? That is preposterous. So if you believe the prosecution's theory, and they told you all this about a bloody trail, where's the blood back there, ladies and gentlemen? There's not one drop of blood. Where's the blood back there? Where's the trail that leads to that glove? And further,
there was none.
Look at this. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Not something I'm making up. You're seeing this with your own eyes. Look at the glove. Now, when that glove is picked up, remember, is there any blood on the ground? Any blood on that shrubbery? Any blood on anything there? Where's the blood? Furman and Van Adder, as we discuss them later, will say that when they get that glove after 6 o'clock in the morning, it's still moist and sticky. Remember their testimony? Where's the blood on the ground? Where's the blood on the leaves around there? Where's any of that? That glove looks as though
there's blood on the
it's been placed
scarecrow.
there.
Rain on the
That glove
scarecrow,
looks as
blood on
though
the plow.
It's been placed there. You look at A, you'll see how far it is out to the street. So their theory doesn't hold water. It doesn't make sense. And so they get mad at Cato Kalin, and they tell you why he's biased. He's just indebted to OJ Simpson, so we just can't trust him.
I thought that too, Eric, but I thought that would be too
On the
obscure.
wall, and he becomes
I like
part
the
of
way
that
you
theory.
think.
But their theory doesn't make sense. And when you were back there deliberating on this case, you're never
There you
gonna
go.
be
That's one for Chandler.
able to reconcile this timeline and the fact there's no blood back there, that OJ Simpson would run into an air conditioning on his own property. And then under her scenario, he still has the knife and the clothes. But what did she tell you yesterday? Well, he still has the knife and he's in these bloody clothes and presumably in bloody shoes. And what does he do? He goes in the house. Now, thank heaven, Judge Ito took us on a jury view. You've seen this house. You've seen this carpet. If he went
And it
in that
matches the
house
drapes.
with bloody shoes, with bloody clothes, with his bloody hands, as they say, where's the blood on the doorknob? Where's the blood on the light switch? Where's the blood on the banister? Where's the blood on the carpet? It's like almost white carpet going up those stairs. Where's all that blood trail they've been banding about in this mountain of evidence? You'll see it's little more than a river or a stream. They don't have any mountain or ocean of evidence. It's not so because they say so. That's just rhetoric. We, this afternoon, are talking about the facts. And so it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. She has him alive, still with these bloody clothes. And then she does something very unusual. Again, on the time. Remember, she gave Mr. Goldman 10 minutes to get dressed and to go over to Nicole Brown Simpson's house with this envelope. Mr. Simpson, she says, who walks in this house in the walkway. And by the way, they were wrong. She was wrong about something else again I'd like to read you. She's wrong in her description.
Well, while he's finding that, let's do our little midstream grift here with Chandler Remington. Chandler Remington, for those of you who do not know who she is, if you're one of the 3 people on the entire internet who doesn't know who she is, she's Chandler Remington. tell us about yourself here quickly. Give us your 411 here.
Sure. Well, I'm Chandler Remington. I'm a paralegal from Los Angeles, California, and I have my own channel, Remy Legal, where I advocate for men. I just recently started an awesome series called Wicked Women. We're doing it every week. I'm trying to do it Fridays, but this week I'm going to do it Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I talk about the evil that women do and kind of, sort of balance out the stories out there, because there are a lot of stories about evil women who do terrible things. I like pointing out how men can
You
be
see, it would
victims.
be this mat
Sorry.
that you would put.
What was that about? Am I jumping to conclusions about something, or did you just click that accidentally?
Just clicked it accidentally.
I love when Megan came on here, by the way, and she just was like,
Yes.
I can click all the buttons when you left, and she just clicked Donald Trump going, China. But anyway, I'm Chandler Remington. I'm doing a brand new series. Go check me out on Remy Legal. I'm going to be on, I think, Laid Back News tomorrow, probably, and I'm going to be appearing on Ozzy's Birthday Bash in the morning. So stick around for that. Look forward to that. Go subscribe to me and look forward to new content.
Awesome. You heard it right here. Remy_legal.
And I'm on OJ Thursdays every week, bright and early, with Legal Vices here, who is awesome and my best friend. And I'm so grateful to be here because we have a lot of fun. And we're going to do a new trial at some point when we're done with closing arguments.
Yes,
You guys are going to love that.
Handpicked by Chandler Remington herself.
It was my idea. We're going to love it. Everybody's going to love that one. It's going to be great.
We'll tell you about it in a few weeks. And right, let's check in on our like and subscribe. Both of you haven't hit the like button. Now is your chance. We got 197 people here and 136 likes. Get down there. Let's even up these numbers. And just subscribe. Just
do your job, people. Love ya.
Worst catchphrases rejected by Johnnie Cochran. The worst catchphrases rejected by Johnnie Cochran. 16% of you like loose belt, case melt. This is lame, I know. 21% of you like cap fit fail, skip jail. 24% of you like small cap, beat the rap. I want to do something about shoes, but I didn't want to sacrifice either of those caps. They were pretty good jokes. And 39%,
you gotta lose. Something like that.
39% of you say short pants, guilty, no chance. All right, that's the best. I did want to, like I said, I did want to do something with the shoes, but I couldn't decide which of the cap jokes to say. Well, jokes. I use that term very loosely. I couldn't sacrifice one of the caps.
That one's difficult. I don't know which one I would choose. I haven't voted in the poll yet because I wasn't sure which one I wanted to pick.
Yeah, so there. Anyway, there we go.
That's my job. I'll pick one.
All right, that's the midstream grift. Now again, Friday evening U.S. time, we're going to be doing some updates on Becky Hill and the Murdoch case in preparation for the hearings coming up on the 29th, which as we've just been talking about with one of our fellow subscriber chatters here. We're going to be doing that on the 29th. Monday, Maritime Monday, Penley Lifeboat Disaster Redux. Tuesday, we're going to be doing some more of the Jane Doe and Clayton Eckerd documents, and we're going to do some more deep diving into that. Wednesday, can't remember what I said we were going to do Wednesday. I'll have to try to remember what I was going to do Wednesday. Thursday, more OJ, and Friday, Legal Vices Lady Bits. F it, Friday the 19th. Do not miss that. So, all right, let's get back into it. I think he's had enough time to find what he was looking for, so let's go.
Great guest list, by the way, for that one. Looking forward to it.
Of Alan Park. I can locate it. Alan Park says he saw this figure in the walkway only. And so that we're clear about that, let me just read it to you. I don't have to just tell you what I think it is. I'm going to read it for you.
Yeah.
20571, counsel, line 17. Yes, I saw a figure come down. Well, not come down, but I saw a figure come into the entranceway of the house, just about where the driveway starts. So a figure come into the entranceway of the house, just about where the driveway starts there. Do you see that right there, the driveway is? That's what he said. Yesterday, they were trying to put it all down here and have him come, because that was convenient to their theory. But that's not what the witness said. You look at the facts of this case and you'll see, not what they tell you. continuing it on. There is absolutely no evidence at all that Mr. Simpson ever tried to hide a knife or clothes or anything else on his property. You recall that Furman, and when I get to Furman, we'll be spending some time on him, as you might imagine. But one of the things he said was that he encountered cobwebs further down that walkway, indicating, if that part is true, and I don't vouch for him at all, there'd been nobody down that pathway for quite some time. And so she talks about OJ being very, very recognizable. She talks about OJ Simpson getting dressed up to go commit these murders. And just before we break for our break, I was thinking.
Oh, tell us, what were you thinking?
Last night about this case and their theory and how it didn't make any sense and how it didn't fit and how something is wrong. It occurred to me how they were going to come here and stand up here and tell you how OJ Simpson was going to disguise himself. Was going to put on a knit cap and some dark clothes, and he was going to get in his white Bronco and this recognizable person and go over and kill his wife. That's what they want you to believe. That's how silly their argument is. And I said to myself, maybe I can demonstrate this graphically. Let me show you something. this is a knit cap. I'm gonna put this knit cap on. You've been seeing me for a year.
Thug life.
If I put this knit cap on,
Looks so
who
hood.
am I? I'm still Johnnie Cochran with a knit cap. And if you look at OJ Simpson over there, and he has a rather large head, OJ Simpson in a knit cap from 2 blocks away is still OJ Simpson. It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit,
Can't disguise.
you must acquit. Good time, guys.
You said it again, Jeff.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-afternoon
Well,
recess at this time. Remember,
people
all
got
my
mad at me. They said it was
admonitions
too
will stand in
loud.
Recess for 15.
All right, that's the end of the first part there. We'll exit that out and bring up the next one. Yeah, the people were upset. They think it's too loud.
What, your little sound effect that you're doing when he says it?
Yeah.
We could at least do like a little jig or something like that. Just saying.
But like nobody's ever said it was too loud before. Is it just the Chewbacca that's too loud?
Well, Chewbacca did startle me, I will say. I was not expecting Chewbacca. And I don't think that it fit. It did not fit.
So he had to acquit.
Yes.
Exactly. Anyway.
I liked somebody in chat, I can't remember who said, like, if it doesn't make sense, you must trust the defense or something like that. I thought that was good. I like that.
Something like that. I like that too.
Whoever said that, you're clever. Sorry if I missed you. I would give you credit if I knew who you were.
I saw it. It was I can't remember who said it either. The horns were loud. Woke my cat. Well, that's cats. And yes, the snort. For those of you that aren't aware, I do have 2 like 50-pound, like 23-kilogram English bulldogs over here, and they're snoring.
Oh, are they? I couldn't tell.
Just so people knew who was making that noise. So, all right, they've taken their break. Too legit to quit. Yeah.
The record reflect that we've been rejoined by all of our jury panel
loud.
members. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, again.
It doesn't sound loud to me.
And Mr. Cochran, you may continue with your final argument.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Closing arguments, Ito.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience thus far, and we'll start up again and see if we can make it to dinner. When we left, just before we broke,
Judge Ito, Lance
I was
Ito.
sharing with you a knit hat or a knit cap that we've heard so much about in this case. And it reminded me that there was testimony early on that Detective Lang had refused basically to pick up a knit cap inside the Brown residence that was shown to him, I think, by some of the lawyers and one of the investigators on that date, because these are fairly common. But they don't really disguise anybody who's noticeable, do they? And although I was the guinea pig here this afternoon, if you were to put a knit cap on, how's that going to disguise you? We've been together. I'd know your face anywhere now, and you'd know mine. And the people in Brentwood, in West Los Angeles, would know OJ Simpson. They know his car.
Did you just see
And
OJ
knowing
Simpson stab
that's
that
where he
woman?
lives.
Did you see that?
Even the prosecutors say
Wearing the knit cap
he's so
thinking he can
famous that
disguise
he
his
can't
big
go
old
anywhere
head.
where he wouldn't be recognized.
He got big
Now,
old
one of
head.
the things about this people's timeline or
Ain't
whatever
nobody got time for that.
is that you recall that some of OJ's bags were already packed outside of the house on
No,
that bench
Jesus said OJ.
when Cato came outside to investigate the thumps, which he'd heard. And this is interesting because the prosecutors have kind of talked at cross purposes on this. Cato at some point comes out because he hears these thumps allegedly. And he has a little tiny flashlight, or I think the court called it a pen light or a mag light or something like that. And it was something small because it's dark back down that walkway. Apparently he went partway down that walkway and then he came back. It's interesting, isn't it? He came back and at some point he lets Park in. I remember all these questions about opening the gate and everything. Remember, there's a dog there. Isn't there a dog there named Chachi? There's a lot of talk about these dogs, and you've heard a little bit about these dogs. But one thing that I think is the prosecutors make these kind of wild speculations. You now know
Joni loves
that
Chachi.
the Akita dog was bought by OJ, as was Chachi. Remember, one of the dogs died, and like a good dad, he let the dog stay at the other house sometime with his son Justin. And they named the dog after Cato, because I think the understanding of what you've heard from Arnell. But at any rate, I point that out because we know there was another dog over there named Chachi, a black dog, black chow. But while Cato is out looking for these thumps what happens to these thumps, Mr. Simpson talks to him. In fact, they go in the house together because Mr. Simpson is going to help him look or help him find a larger flashlight. And then someone says, or he's reminded that Mr. Simpson is running late for his trip. So then he takes off. My understanding of the facts is Mr. Simpson said, I'll call you later and have you put the alarm on. He was getting out of there. Parks was already there. But I think the interesting thing to remember is that some of the bags were already down, including that golf bag were already down there. This was not any unexpected trip. He started putting things down there. If you look at everything in a cynical fashion, you heard this morning, aha, there was a knapsack over, or nap bag, or some little bag they were talking about over in the driveway.
I like the way he mocks the defense.
If you're a golfer, isn't it reasonable to assume there's golf balls in there? And if you put that in your golf bag, I mean, what's the big deal? Because they've got to try to theorize and try to explain everything, which they can't explain. They weren't there. They rushed to judgment. And it leads to this kind of wild speculation. You have to do that when you don't have a case. And that's all you've seen them do time after time after time. With regard to that walkway, lest I be totally clear to you, if OJ Simpson had been the one for whatever reason to walk into that air conditioning, where's the hair and trace? Where's the fiber? Where's the blood? They want to tell you about his hands, fingers bleeding 1 minute, and it stops bleeding. In Miss Clark's scenario, he bleeds, it coagulates, stops bleeding, then it starts bleeding again. Because that's convenient for her theory.
Well, it does happen that way
as I
sometimes.
listen to both
Sometimes.
of them, I wanted to call them doctor. Dr. Clark?
Not
Because
unrealistic.
Dr. Clark told you, well, gee, look at that blood drop. That cut wasn't big enough for that blood drop. You're not any doctor. How does she know that? Dr. Darden. For the love and the forlorn. He knows everything about relationships. He just speculates on and on and on. He's got this great, vivid imagination. The only thing is, this is real life. This isn't anything from Murder, She Wrote. If they tried to sell this story to Murder, She Wrote, they'd send it back and said, that's unbelievable. You're going to see that as we tie it together. It's nice to have vivid imaginations, but not in this courtroom. Because here, you are searching for truth on this journey for justice. So we know that Cato had some concerns. He was looking around. We know that at some point, Mr. Simpson comes down the stairs carrying the Louis Vuitton bag or whatever, and then Mr. Simpson leaves about 11:02 for the airport. I think that's pretty clear based upon the evidence. And you'll recall that Ms. Clark again gives Mr. Simpson 5 minutes to rush in. According to her theory, he rushes in, changes clothes, disposes of all these clothes, showers, packs, does everything, and comes downstairs and says, composes himself. Can you imagine that? I mean, who do they think they're talking to? In 5 minutes, he does all these things. And then they tell you that, you know, under this post-homicidal way you act, you get yourself all composed and you just do this. This is preposterous. They're not experts. They can't testify. Those are just their wildest, rankest theories. You use your common sense when they tell you things like that. OJ Simpson was OJ Simpson, the way he always appeared by the people who knew him and talked to him. We'll talk more about that when we talk about demeanor. But the reason they can't explain his demeanor and the way he acted like he always acted, they then talk about, well, you can't tell who's a murderer. I mean, those are all real convenient words, aren't they? But they fly in the face of reasonable activity by a reasonable man on that particular night. So there's Allen Park. OJ Simpson comes down within 5 minutes of the time they believe he goes upstairs. No time to dispose of bloody clothes.
No time.
What about blood on the carpet?
This is so
What
smooth.
about dirt on this
Yes.
white carpet? How does he shower? How does he get dressed? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all, does it? Park himself says the golf bag was already packed and ready to go when he pulled into the driveway. And Miss Clark went to great trouble to tell you how credible she thought Mr. Park was. Now he tried to lay everything out. And I think by and large, we agree with that. But I think if you're going to quote Mr. Park, you ought to quote him accurately and not attempt to mislead or whatever.
Ooh,
And so what I did is
bam.
I went back to the
There
transcript
you
again.
go.
Wait, Jeff,
Miss
remind me,
Clark
who was
told you
Mr.
and
Park?
showed you
I
that
actually don't recall this witness.
Photograph yesterday.
Did we see him?
About
He was
whether or
the
not
limo
Mr.
driver, I
Park
believe.
Got it.
saw
Oh, very important
I
witness.
was looking at the Bronco, or looking for the Bronco, on the night of June 12th.
No blood in the
Remember
shower
that?
drain, Heather Sparrow.
She told you yesterday I spent a long
That's
time
big.
with him. And so I remembered
That's what she said.
that I asked him questions and his response.
Phrasing.
See, I think he did it, but I can't explain
I
that there's no
asked
blood in
him
the
at
shower
some
drain.
point, I'm asking you if you looked to, made an effort to see if there was a car parked. Answer, no. Was that a correct answer at that time? Answer, yes. All right, question. There might have been a car parked there and you didn't see it? Answer, correct. And the reason why you don't know one way or the other is because you weren't focusing on any cars or paying any attention.
In
Isn't that
cars.
right?
Here in my car.
And I went on to ask still another part of this question. Basically, your goal was to get Mr. OJ Simpson, try to get him to the airport on time, isn't it?
That's kind of my theory,
Answer,
Cody.
That's correct. Question, that is what you ended up doing,
I don't think so.
isn't it, sir? Answer, yes.
Nobody knows.
And that's the testimony.
But see, Heather
That's
Sparrow
fine.
has a
Talk
good
and tell
point
you,
here.
because they want to fit their theory that, well, he didn't see that Bronco out there and do all this drama. But isn't it better to read the record? You want to be accurate, which I've just done for you.
Yep, much
Now,
better.
This is an effective
Isn't it
closing
reasonable
argument.
to ask Mr. Park also? Well, Mr. Park, if you were around the premises there and you were up at Ashford and down at Rockingham, did you ever hear a Bronco come driving up?
All you have to do
Did
is
you ever
introduce
hear a
doubt.
door slam? Did you ever hear an engine of a Bronco? And
No, they
fortunately,
don't run. They're
We
full.
asked him some of those questions.
Ah,
I'd ask him about seeing a Bronco
what?
in the past, and remember
They're a
he talked
Ford.
about
You can't hear their
seeing one
engines.
back
They
in
don't
88
work.
or something of that nature. And so then I asked him this
Hey, don't
question.
knock Ford. Ford's a good car. I like Fords.
And would
Yeah,
I be
Ford.
correct in assuming that those engines can be loud on occasion? Those
I did have to get
cars,
rid of it because its
meaning the
engine
Broncos.
died. But
Answer,
that's
could be.
besides the point.
Question, you didn't hear the engines on any cars or anything that sounded like a Ford Bronco that night, did you? Answer, no. Now, again, I've read from the transcript for you.
While he's taking a drink, let's pause real quick here with his yellow solo cup. Nick Starro Trial Watch, OJ's character opening scene. Oh, we already read that one. You get a twofer. Thank you so much. And Island, too early, need doggo status update. We also read that one. Why didn't I delete those? But just for the record, we are just under, we'll give like 82 away. We're miles away. And Smopo Vienna, cheers to Jeff and chat. If the stuff arrives this week, it's not going to arrive this week. I'm still trying to get them to send it to me. There's issues going on. Maybe unboxing on Monday. It'll be a couple of Mondays from now before we do an unboxing. And you'll have plenty of heads up because of the greets from my father, Harry, to you. Cool. All right. Well, we'll make sure we'll give you a heads up on the unboxing before it happens. And M. Young with $2 for the dogs. Thank you so much for the support, M. Young. And Adara the Wholesome, 10 minutes behind, but Chewbacca blew out my eardrums. Well, I think we've solved that problem. Just in case.
Adara, me too. I'm just recovering from going deaf from that. This is too much for me. Sorry.
We're testing it now, so here we go. 3, 2, 1. That should be much better.
Jeffrey Vices, I cannot with you.
No, was that too loud again?
I'm sound sensitive, damn it. Okay.
And I gave people warnings, but
you didn't really warn like efficiently though. Okay, I won't get on your case. It's your channel. You can Chewbacca all you want. It's fine. I get it. I would do that on my
3, 2,
channel.
1. How do you test it better than say 3, 2, 1? Bradley Sugars, legal advice. Do you think it's improper for Johnny to appeal to broader public policy objectives like police reform to be considered by jurors in their verdict? No, but he is definitely within his rights to call out the fact that Furman was a corrupt cop who was a racist and a horrible person and possibly planted evidence, because the prosecution agrees with everything up to the planting of the evidence.
Well, the prosecution brought it up. They discussed it.
Yes.
So it's like, if they're going to put it in their closing, why can't he put it in his? But I agree that there is something you can't really like ask the jury to, make a decision on the basis of a broader social implication. They tried to do that in the Deb trial, and there was an objection to that. It didn't really like go forward. It's a little slippery, but because making objections during closing arguments is always tricky. But he didn't exactly do that. So,
And Ryan Macron says, legal advice, are you going to cover the Sarah Boone trial? See, this is the horrible thing. This is the horrible reality now. And something better give, because the YNW Melly double murder retrial, Sarah Boone and Karen Reed are all supposed to take place at the same time.
Oh my gosh. All of those really at the same? Yeah. So you have to kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, we've been ride or die with Melly since since the first trial started. So we got to do Melly. So I hope the other two are delayed or Melly is delayed. So.
I think Sarah Boone is actually going to plea out. I don't tell me how I know, but she seems to really like her lawyer, and that would be the smart thing for her to do. So I'm not really expecting Sarah Boone to go to trial, but if it does, I think it's definitely going to be delayed continuously. It just has been. So we'll see on that, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Well,
personally,
we'll find out.
It's a good trial. It's fascinating. I did some videos on it personally. You can check out my channel and watch them. I'm sorry, I had to plug myself for a second. I did. I've done a couple videos on Sarah Boone, and it's a fascinating case, but she should plea out. And honestly, there's not a lot of material there, so I think the other trials are a little more interesting to cover. Personally, I'm kind of over Sarah Boone personally. Like, I'm not feeling it.
I think it's going to go to trial. It'll be a short trial. But that's what I'm thinking, because she's too arrogant.
You do, yeah. I think she'll plea. You want to bet? We could make a bet on it.
Sure, whatever you want.
I haven't seen another letter from her in a while.
She's been doing things.
She has.
All right.
I haven't been paying attention. All right, moving on.
He's done with his drink here. Let's move
back to Cochran. Let's do it. Let's do closings.
I previously read to you about where Mr. Park said he saw Mr. Simpson in the entranceway of the house. We'll put that aside. So we know that Mr. OJ Simpson was preparing to leave for this trip that had been long planned. And when we summarize then the two timelines, it seems to me that their timeline is not even reasonable. It doesn't make any sense. It's a much less credible version than the testimony you've heard from our witnesses. Their version does in no way disprove the defense timeline. We don't have to even put that forward, but we did. There then must be a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Consider everything that Mr. Simpson would have had to have done in a very short time on their timeline. He would have had to drive over to Bundy, as they've described, in this little limited time frame where there's not enough time. Kill two athletic people in a struggle that takes 5 to 15 minutes. walked slowly from the scene, returned to the scene, supposedly looking for a missing hat and glove and poking around. Go back to this alley a second time. Drive more than 5 minutes to Rockingham, where nobody hears him or sees him.
Garbage truck in my neighborhood.
Either stop along the way to hide these bloody clothes and knives, etc., or take them in the house with him, where they're still hoisted by their own petard, because there's no blood, there's no trace, there's no nothing.
We can't say
So that's
petard. We
why
have to
the
say P
prosecution
word.
has had to try and push back their timeline. Even to today, they're still pushing it
Look at
back.
Johnnie Cochran
It doesn't make
bringing
any
the
sense.
maritime
It doesn't
Monday
fit.
terms and hoisting
That's
the
why
petard.
they abandoned Ellen Aronson, why they abandoned Dan Mandel,
I like that phrase.
why they didn't want to call Denise Pilnack, why they didn't want to call Robert Heidstrup. That's why we're now hearing this preposterous add-on of time that the thumps may have occurred at 10:15. That's Ms. Clark's wish list, but that's not the evidence in this case. Now let's turn our attention for a moment and let's look at some other things that don't fit in this case. So I started to say before, perhaps the single most defining moment in this trial was the day they thought they would conduct this experiment on these gloves. They had this big buildup with Mr. Rubin, who had been out of the business for
I don't know.
5, 6, 7, 8 years. He'd been in marketing even when he was there.
Really, hoisting his own petard isn't really
They were going to try to
isn't really a
demonstrate to you.
maritime thing either. It's
Hi, paralegal Liz.
These
I love
were
seeing
the
paralegals in the
killer's
chat.
gloves, and these gloves would fit Mr. Simpson.
it's from Hamlet. Yeah.
You don't need any photographs to understand this. I suppose that vision is indelibly imprinted in each and every one of your minds of how Mr. Simpson walked over here and stood before you, and you saw 4 simple words. The gloves didn't fit. And all their strategy started changing after that. Rubin was called back here more than all their witnesses, 4 times altogether. Rubin testified more than the investigating officers in this case, because their case from that day forward was slipping away from them. And they knew it, and they could never, ever recapture it.
Mm-hmm.
We may all live to be 100 years old, and I hope we do.
You're not. You're only
But you'll
going to
always
67.
remember. But those gloves, when Darden asked them to try them on, didn't fit. They know they didn't fit.
So
And no matter what they do, they can't make them fit. They can talk about latex gloves. Didn't make any difference. They could talk about shrinkage. But we did something even better, didn't we?
I was in the
We
pool.
brought a man who won the Dondero Award, Dr. Herb McDonald. who
don't talk
did
about
an
shrinkage. It's
experiment
embarrassing for men.
on these Aris-like gloves.
Oops.
They wanted to talk about liquid or blood shrinking them. You'll see it up there. And what did he say? They don't shrink. Put as much blood as you can on them. They don't shrink. Doesn't work. They have the power of the state. They could have done their own demonstration.
I think he stopped
They
taking his
didn't,
arthritis medication
because
and
you
let
know
his
he's
hands
right.
swell. But that's just me.
So we went about and proved to you these things. We didn't just stand up here and speculate as to what might be. We called a leading witness who came in and passed that on for you. So you could see the overlays on there. They cannot explain that. They could have called witnesses, they didn't. We called the witness. Proved beyond any doubt those gloves don't shrink. Gloves didn't fit Mr. Simpson because he's not the killer.
He's toying with me now.
Then they will say, and Ms. Clark said the other day, well, gee, these gloves had been thawed and they've been frozen and they've been all those things. But remember Susan Brockbank? Those gloves were measured on June 21st, 1994.
Now, leather
Those
does
gloves are
shrink when
basically
blood
the same
dries.
size now as they were June 21st. So
If
that
you get a
won't
glove
work.
wet that's leather, it will
They come,
shrink.
they tell you all these things,
when it
but it
dries.
won't work. And so if you looked at gloves, here's the overlay. And there's something else about these gloves that I want to take a minute and share with you before we talk about Mr. Rubin and his testimony. You saw these pictures of the gloves? We had a couple of pairs of Aris Light. And when you have
Oh, I love it. Oh,
gloves
the
that don't
props.
fit.
Love it.
Totally not a Russian, but
Could
cows
hardly do
don't shrink if
anything,
it rains, right?
Makes it very, very tough.
Not the same thing. Something
I put
that's
on
been
a pair of
tanned and
Airslide gloves that are
Blair-
real tight. You can see
why is he trying them
how tough
on?
it is to try to get these on my hands.
They're your
I'll put them
hands,
on anyway
Johnny.
here.
Why is he putting them on? Are they
Demonstrative.
It's the same
Those aren't
kind of
the same-
gloves that Dr. McDonald
Are those the
did
murder
his
gloves?
experiment with.
No, the same
There'd be
brand.
no mistake about
Okay.
the leather,
Really
all
nice.
those things they like to talk about.
Beautiful leather.
It's hard to get on. Not as hard as Mr. Simpson, but they're hard to get along.
Are they hard to get
I
off?
want you to see these gloves because they want to tell you that
I couldn't resist.
when you take off gloves, you take them off by this V portion.
I don't.
Remember
That
this?
stretches
Somebody
it.
testified. You don't take off gloves
You
that
don't-
way.
There you
One of
go.
the people's witnesses said that. You don't take them
Yeah.
off that way.
Exactly.
So we're
You use
asked
the
to
fingertips.
believe that in this tremendous struggle, that night in which Ron Goldman fought so valiantly, that somehow or other, in that struggle, somebody took these gloves. The way you pull gloves off, I have to tell you
Did he?
this, you pull them off like this. Even Ruben knew this. Pull them off like this. The gloves came off like this, not through any way like that. So I think it's interesting when you look at these gloves and you look at what they're trying to have you believe. They talked a lot about in their rebuttal case about the glove pictures and the glove photographs. Remember that each of the glove photographs were taken, or pictures of Mr. Simpson, were taken in the winter. You know the evidence? Mr. Simpson was living in New York, generally from August through January when he's at football season, or working for NBC Sports. Generally in Southern California, you don't need or wear winter dress gloves in California.
True.
You don't go skiing in Aris light gloves. And you remember that the police, in searching Mr. Simpson's house, remember Detective Lane? They searched OJ Simpson's house for gloves, for shoes, for clothes. Found one brown glove. I want you to look at it at some point. The brown glove that looks very similar to the brown gloves that Mr. Simpson.
You got more gloves.
It's a stay
One brown, what?
outside.
One brown glove?
Is there an objection to that? What you saying?
This glove was picked up on June 28th. But what I
He
was
just
saying
ignores
was,
her.
this
Yeah.
glove came out of
Sorry,
Simpson's
Marcia.
house. And I ask you to look at this glove.
Like,
have
hey,
it
you
back in
collected the
January.
evidence. Shut up.
Look at it compared to some of the gloves he wore that day, on the photographs. There were no Aris-like gloves in O.J. Simpson's house. That's the point. They took this one glove on June 28th. That's the point. And the point is, quite simply, Richard Rubin, let's put him in perspective. Bob Blazer questioned him. On his fourth trip here, we discovered a letter that he sent to the prosecution. This man had become a soldier in the prosecution's army. Wrote him a letter saying he wanted to come to their victory party. The problem with that letter was he wrote the letter before we'd ever had a chance to put on our case. That solidifies the rush to judgment, doesn't it? Because in America,
It does.
you have a right to wait until you hear all the evidence. That's what makes this country great. People are not making up their minds at the beginning. You don't decide a baseball game or a football game at halftime. You wait until the
Good.
end. That's what this judge tells you every day.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Keep an open
epic.
mind. You've heard everything. But Rubin wasn't going to do that. He was getting ready for the victory party. In his own letter that he wrote to them, and he asked further, send me your cards. I want Mr. Hodgman's card, Miss Clark's card. He'll build a memorial to himself on his wall. The number of times he'd come out here. You talk about people who want to be involved in this case, you stack him up to those other people who didn't want to be here. Richard Rubin, one of those people, and it goes to his bias. It goes to his interest. I'm telling you the facts. We told you about this letter. You've got to deal with that. you're going to be fair and impartial in this case. And then, as with all the prosecution's evidence, they're going to tell you that something is not like what it seems. They take a Bloomingdale's receipt in which there's no size, or color, or anything else on this receipt. And I find this particularly interesting because it's part and parcel of the prosecution's case, isn't it? The way they've done things in this case. Look at this receipt from Bloomingdale's, and this is in evidence. We have the number for the court. 372B, Your Honor. Now, this is this famous purchase, December of 1990, wasn't it? The lot number or the style number is 70268. That's what it says. It doesn't say anything about 70263. It's two items. It says $77. This $77 is what it says for those two items. It doesn't say anything about $55. It says $77. And it doesn't say anything about color or size or anything of that nature.
So it's not a receipt for the gloves? Is that what you're saying?
Oh,
I'm
these
confused.
had to be Eris-like gloves.
I don't understand what
That looks like a computer-generated receipt. I wonder how, if it was incorrectly inputted, it didn't spit it out. This transaction apparently went through, and whatever was purchased was purchased. The point is, it's part of, again, the weakness of the prosecution's case in telling you one thing, and the record shows something else.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have any receipt anywhere when you get back there says anything about any 70263. You don't have one witness who ever says that Nicole Brown Simpson bought any Eris lights and gave them to OJ Simpson. There is no such witness because it didn't happen. And the rest of it is speculation and theory on their part. Cynical speculation, I might add, to try to rush to judgment and win at any cost.
And jump to conclusions.
Don't make me push the buttons.
Now, you heard during Mr. Darden's effective argument last night a lot of statements. And just before I get to that part, let me say a couple other things about Mr. Rubin. Might be appropriate. Remember, Mr. Rubin's an interesting witness. When he was brought back out here this last time, he was asked, well, look, how many glove manufacturers are there in the world? I mean, he acknowledged there are over 100. Then Bob Blazer asked him a question, well, you know, how many did you check with? 2. Check with 2, and then he stopped looking. Remember, he found out that this Brosser stitching could be made on Singer sewing machines. Some of you may know more about that than I do, but they stopped making them after a period of time. But he stopped looking after a period of time, never called anybody else. And that's interesting because that compares the way the prosecution witnesses have conducted themselves throughout. Compare the fact that he stopped looking after 2 with Agent Martz, who finds 3 of the 4 things you need to find EDTA on the sock and the back gate. Rather looking carefully for the characteristic, the 4th one, he stopped searching. He uses a far less discriminating test. Consider the EAPB found under Nicole Brown Simpson's fingernails, where they try to come in and tell you it's a degraded BA. And on cross-examination again,
this is better than a degraded BJ.
To admit there was no specific support. In any
sometimes those can be good too.
For a BA degrading to a B, and this was by
I mean,
all
if you
accounts,
like being degraded during those.
Double-banded B. The reason they didn't want to pursue that, because she may have scratched somebody.
Never received ones, can't really
They never
speak.
pursued those things.
The
Second had at Bundy. The Bundy location inside. When the defense investigator finds this hat, nobody wanted to collect it. They refused, in fact, to collect it. When we, in this trial, before you, discovered that evidence had been moved at Bundy, and that a key piece of evidence, the piece of paper, had disappeared, they didn't do anything to find out about it that we know of. We're concerned about those kinds of things. But it's important then when you look at Rubin, because you put him along with the other prosecution witnesses and the things that they've had to say. I told you about that Bloomingdale's receipt. I told you about Brenda Vimage who came in. One other thing about Brenda Vimage that was interesting, she was a lady who, that was the day, I won't forget that day ever probably, because that was the day that she's a pretty tough witness. I was just trying to talk about receipts and things. She's pretty tough. And I was asking some questions. And remember, we asked her the question, well, who's the lady?
He died in 2005.
For this. And that lady, whose name was Hollings or something like that, was in this building. They never called her of that receipt. They didn't have to call her, but we know she was here because Brenda Vimage told us about that. We also learned something else about these gloves, that even in extra large, there's probably 3 different sizes. There's the undersize, the standard, and the oversize. And it depends what lot you get. That's what it boils down to, ladies and gentlemen. We know that. That makes sense, doesn't it? And so when you look at everything regarding these gloves, by the way, the lady's name was Helena Phipps, Phipps. She was in the courthouse and, of course, was never called by the prosecution. She was the actual sales clerk. But I think that the important thing about these gloves that Mr. Rubin was helping us with, in a couple of the pictures of the photographs of the gloves, Mr. Simpson obviously had a heat pack on his hands inside the gloves. You could see the heat pack. If you lived in cold weather, you know about that. Try though they will about shrinking, and they're going to show you, gee, it's raining out there, and it's doing all those things. Isn't that preposterous? About
Come on, Marcia, stop
to
it.
try to contort and distort the facts. Try to get away from that tactical mistake, showing you in the gloves didn't fit.
Not going to help you.
Spend all this time on that. And the gloves still don't fit. Rubin can't help you. Rubin is biased. Can't find those gloves because OJ Simpson's never had those gloves. For them to say otherwise is rank speculation. Now, as I said with Mr.
That
Darden,
thing on his nipple area, I mean his
we
lapel
heard
pin?
a lot of
It's a
information
cross.
about this so-called domestic discord that he talked about last night and today. And you know, we've been told in this case over and over again that you are to do your job devoid of sympathy or passion or emotion. And I dare say you are very, very intelligent people. And it is very, very hard for any of us to sit here, have to look at photographs of dead bodies, people who did not deserve to die. This case is about who committed these crimes. Not trying to make you and the audience cry about what happened back on June 12th. So they can do it over and over again, but it's not going to work because you understand. This case is not about trying to appeal to your emotions. This case is about the facts and whether these facts establish guilt or innocence beyond a reasonable doubt. You all understand that. So we heard last night, and we're treated to this morning, some very, very interesting observations by my learned colleague, Mr. Darden.
It's learned,
We start
Mr.
off
Simpson.
by sharing with you, and I'll use his board on evidence of other crimes.
Learned. I'm just about to beat your ass in court. That's what he was whispering, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall.
Now, this is interesting because Mr. Darden started off by saying, well, you know, we're going to put together this other piece. It's not really one of the elements of the crime of murder, motive, but we're going to talk to you about motive now. We're going to tell you
It's a slow
convince you
fuse.
about the motive in this
Slow
case.
burn. Slow fuse.
And then he spent a long time trying to do that. As I said, he did a fine job and to address the facts.
Shorter and
conjure
shorter.
up a lot of emotion.
Shrink.
You notice how at the end he kind of petered out of steam there, and I'm sure he got tired, but he petered out because this fuse he kept talking about kept going out. It never blew up. It never exploded. There was no triggering mechanism. There was nothing that would lead you to that. It was a nice analogy. It was almost like that baby analogy of a baby justice in the house of fire.
That was so
You
stupid.
don't have to go through any house of fire.
That was so
You just have to keep
stupid.
your eyes on the
What
prize.
was that again? The baby
The prize
justice
is
thing?
justice.
See, that's when we mentioned you stepped out for a bit.
No, I heard it. I just don't
And you
remember what
mentioned
it
you
was.
Came back. It was like, there's a house on fire. It's filled with smoke. There's smoke everywhere, and you've got to go in the house. And there's a baby in there. It's baby justice.
Oh my
I'm sorry.
god.
I'm sorry. I was being too dramatic. It was like, no, there's a house on fire and it's filling up with smoke, and you got to go in there and you hear a baby crying. That's baby justice. You got to work your way through all the smoke. And if there's defense lawyers in your way, you got to push them out of the way to get to baby justice. You got to save baby justice. That's what
no, sorry, not buying it. Stupid, lame, not engaging. Wow. You think that the jury is going to be like, oh, we've got to save baby justice. I mean, come on, dude. Know your audience, man.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
it was really
well,
bad.
That much is apparent.
And did Johnnie Cochran just call it a cute analogy? Or is
Yeah,
that just
I think he did. Yeah, no, I think he called it cute.
Yeah, that was so dumb. Got to save baby justice. And if there's a couple of defense lawyers in your way, you got to push them. You got to push them away and get to baby justice.
City called justice, and it's a journey that you're leading toward. That's all you got to do. And so this is what this is all about. It's evidence of other crimes. The court, Mr. Darden kind of looked at this and said, oh, Judge, well, whatever limited purpose. But let's talk about the limited purpose for which all of his argument was about. When they talk about this evidence of other crimes, such evidence was received, excuse me, sir, and may be considered by you only for the limited purpose of determining if the
Hey, Joe asks, okay, what's in his front pocket where a square would go? It's a pocket square.
A motive.
It's a pocket square in his pocket where the square goes.
For which you may consider such evidence, you must weigh it in the same manner as you do all other evidence in the case. You are not permitted to consider such evidence for any other purpose. So this isn't about character assassination of OJ Simpson.
They're trying to assassinate baby justice.
This is about Mr. Darden trying to conjure up a motive for you. And at the outset, let me say that none, not one little bit of domestic violence is tolerable between a man and a woman. OJ Simpson is not proud of that 1989 incident. He's not proud of it. But you know what? He paid his debt to that. He went to court. He went through that program. And the one good thing, and no matter how long Darden talked, from 1989.
That also is a coach, Sean Bird.
There's never any physical violence between OJ Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson. And those are the facts.
I don't
He kept going back and forth to 85, 89, 93, but there's no physical violence. In fact, let's look at the incidents that he talked about just quickly.
I think he's been convicted of, at least.
Keep this in mind. This is supposedly for the limited purpose of determining if it tends to show a common scheming plan, identity, or motive. Only for that limited purpose. So keep that in mind. He didn't bother reading all this to you. Let me read you something else again that goes along with this as we consider this evidence. The court's already instructed you about motive. And I listened very carefully as my friend read this. He got to one part and he stopped, but I want to read you the rest of it.
Uh-oh.
Motive is not an element of the crime charged and need not be shown. However, you may consider motive or lack of motive as a circumstance in this case. Presence of motive may tend to establish guilt. He stopped after that last night. I'll read you the rest of it.
Uh-oh.
Absence of motive may tend to establish innocence.
Uh-oh.
You will therefore give its presence or absence, as the case may be,
Objection?
the weight to which you feel or find it is entitled. I wonder why I read you the part about absence.
No, it's part of the jury
motive
instructions.
in this case.
Oh, okay.
Because
Why'd you
as
say
long
then?
as
What was the uh-oh about?
he stood up here and tried to talk to you,
Because Darden stopped after he just said it's evident. It can also be evidence of guilt. He stopped before the part where he said absence of motive can be evidence of innocence.
Oh, I see. Got it.
He didn't read that part. He got called out and he got nailed.
I see.
couldn't show any physical violence after 1989. Could talk about 1985, the incident involving the Mercedes. Simpson wasn't arrested then. He can talk about 1993. And certainly, you'd hate to think that two people could have an argument like that, but there was no physical violence. In fact, the police came out, if you recall, and did some further taping. These people were upset and they were arguing, but they never fought on this occasion. There were no blows on this occasion. And certainly no one wants you, if you think in your background, would not want your worst argument ever tape recorded. OJ Simpson had perhaps his worst argument tape recorded. And then he had the audacity to stand up here and say, well, they didn't call Lenore Walker. We didn't call Lenore Walker because it wasn't necessary. They could have called her. Talked about her having some tests, showed that Mr. Simpson was not antisocial, had no antisocial personality. That wasn't true. Why didn't he call her? Because you don't have to call all witnesses. Just like he said, at some point, all of us, I think, got the message. There are certain horrors of sequestration. I dare say we could still be trying this case, left to our own devices. Somebody had to have some good sense in this courtroom. We had to bring this matter to a close. We did what we set out to do, to demonstrate to you reasonable doubt. We think we've done that. We could call a lot more witnesses that I talked to you about in opening statement, but I don't think that's necessary. Another word about opening statement. In opening statement, I stood before you and I told you this is what we expect to show. This is not evidence. That was in January. This is what I would hope the evidence would show. If there's a witness that I didn't feel was credible or we didn't feel was credible, I wouldn't call that witness. If there's a witness who was not available, we wouldn't call that witness. If we didn't feel a witness was necessary, we wouldn't call that witness.
Unlike the
The
prosecution.
defense doesn't have to prove anything.
True.
We've done that in this case, prove things, however, but we don't have to prove anything. So the witness wasn't called. Don't hold that against OJ Simpson. You hold that against me. And I don't think you can hold that against me because the defendant doesn't have to prove anything. And remember,
True
the
that.
judge has already instructed you as follows. Let me read it to you again so we make this clear. Hey,
That's
Mr.
very
Darden
important.
will remember this. The prosecution
Nice day.
has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crimes charged in the information, and that the defendant was a perpetrator of any such crimes, such charged crimes. The defendant is not required to prove himself innocent or to prove that another person committed the crimes charged. Well, that law is not just for OJ Simpson. That's the law of the state of California for everyone, and they know it. I told you at the beginning, in this search for truth, in your courage, we cannot let them turn the Constitution on its head. I am going to be your reminder of that. So continuing on, he talks about what might sound like character assassination over and over again about these incidents of controlling and jealous rage. And just because he says that supposedly makes it so. Isn't it interesting? 17 years these folks were married. Have two beautiful kids, a beautiful life. Think they had any good times together? Think they ever want to talk about any of the good times?
Well, of course, there are
Think
good
about
times in
even
abusive
after
relationships.
93. Remember, they got a divorce in their chart in 1992. They tried to get back together. Dr. Christian Reichardt told you.
Because they had
It
kids.
wasn't O.J. Simpson. It was Nicole Brown Simpson who asked to get back together in 1993.
That doesn't mean he didn't beat her.
Tried to work it out for about a year. They didn't live together, but they tried to work it out. They talked about this. They tried to date exclusively. They tried to salvage a 17-year marriage. And you could understand that. It was her idea. It didn't work out. And they went their separate ways. The evidence is he'd been dating Paula Barberi back in 1992 for almost a year. When he got back with his wife in April or May of 93, he stopped dating her. When he broke up with his wife again, he started dating her again. He wanted to give it a fair shot. Remember Arnell Simpson said he would wake up sometimes in the morning and Miss Nicole Brown Simpson would be over there with the kids at the house. So during
Yeah,
this
'cause
period
they
of time,
co-parented,
they were trying
obviously.
to get back and get along. They all went to Cabo San Lucas. They had a good life together. It's interesting how the prosecution doesn't want to talk about that at all. In their
The
cynical
911
view of
call
life,
did not indicate that they had a
two-
good life
two
together.
or three
Sorry.
incidents and say, this just tells us the whole picture. Well, all of us.
I don't
all of
appreciate
us.
this.
There's more to the entire picture. And I ask you rhetorically this question: who would know O.J. Simpson better? His mother Eunice,
Or his
His sister
decapitated
Shirley?
wife.
his sister
Jesus.
Carmelita, his daughter Arnell, or Marsha Clark and Chris Darden?
Who would be
What do you
biased
think?
in his
Knows him
favor?
when they sit up here and talk about his public persona and he's got this dark side. Those are all just words.
No.
He's a human being and he's not perfect. He's not proud of some of the things he did, but they don't add up to murder. There's no escalation of force and violence throughout 1989. It's not there. We don't have to call Lenore Walker. Your common sense tells you this. And then he goes into this kind of make-believe fantasy world where he's going to try to tell you on June 12th, he's going to conjure up this rage. June 12th, very interesting day, isn't it? It's wonderful that we live in the age of videotape because he tells you about how OJ Simpson was. Cindy Garvey was telling you how OJ Simpson was. He was this mean, dark, brooding person at this concert, that he was going to kill his ex-wife because he didn't like his seats. I guess that was what it was about, that he didn't like his seats or because he didn't invite her to dinner. Can you imagine that? That's how silly what they're talking about is in this case, as he tries to play out this drama.
People have killed people over stupider things, chicken nuggets, for example.
Rather than talk, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let me show you this video. You watch this video for a moment, and we'll talk about it. This is for Chris Darden. You'll recognize some of the people in this photograph after a while. There's Mr. Simpson kissing Denise Brown, kissing Miss Juditha Brown. It's Mr. Lewis Brown. Talking to a friend. That's his son, Justin, and he kisses. Smiling and happily waving. Mr. Brown's happy. Laughing, falling down, laughing again, bending over, laughing. Now you see that. You see that with your own eyes. You'll have that back in that jury room. How does that comport with this tortured, twisted reasoning that he was angry in some kind of a jealous rage?
That's just one moment in time. I don't like this
now. A jealous
now.
rage like that to you? Your eyes aren't lying to you when you see that.
Anybody can be nice for 5 minutes.
We have videotape. I didn't tell you about that in opening statement. Think that's pretty compelling?
No, I don't.
Thank heaven we have that. And we know in this city how important videotapes can be when people don't want to believe things, even when they see it on videotapes. And you saw that yourself. When you're back there, somebody tries to tell you there was some kind of jealous rage on June 12th. Look at OJ Simpson.
See, in the 90s,
with the Brown family and everyone.
the discourse around domestic violence was
fit.
really different.
Doesn't make any sense. He isn't brooding. He's not angry. He kisses these family members.
In that
He's
moment,
laughing and joking. He's playing with
Well,
his son,
the prosecution didn't show any other evidence of any other state of
I
being.
made up.
I get
These
it.
items don't fit. And
I
if you
just
want to
don't
go
agree.
a little bit further, let's talk about what we know about him that evening. That video is what, about 6 o'clock in the evening?
Prosecution
Let's
messed
start
up.
at 6 o'clock on June 12th. We know he had a good day that day. He had a good week. We'll talk about part of the week in her demeanor, but let's just talk about that part of the evening. 6 o'clock, he's at that recital. You know, you go to a recital because you're proud of your child. You know, and if these recitals, and you all can think back, and those of you who don't have kids will live for this day, you know, these programs are long. Your child is like 33 or 34th on the program. You love everybody else's child, but sometimes you don't want to sit there during the whole thing, you know? We're told some stuff about he moved a chair around. Ever been in an auditorium where you can move chairs around? Most auditorium seats are like those. You can't move those seats around. This is preposterous. Mr. Darden wasn't in that auditorium. And even after that video, like any proud papa, you know what OJ Simpson did? Took a picture, photograph with his daughter. Let's look at this photograph for a minute. You want to see how he looks while he's in this murderous rage, while this fuse is going on that Darden talks about? Where's the fuse now, Mr. Darden? Where's the fuse? Look at that look on his face. Like any proud papa, he's proud of that little girl, and who wouldn't be proud of her? This is post the dance recital. She has the flowers. Apparently he went out and bought for her. He's standing there with her. The photograph's taken. There's no way of knowing. He would have no way of knowing that would be important. He'd have no way of knowing that Chris Darden someday would stand before you and try to make you believe that that man was in a murderous rage at that same time, and that we would bring forward that picture so you would see it with your own eyes, so you'd understand.
Anyone can smile for a photo. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, he was supposed to be in a murderous, jealous rage at this point.
On the back of it.
It's evidence against it.
Okay.
Your mood can change in an instant. You can be in a good
thank
mood
heaven
and then have
again
something make you
for the
snap.
visual.
Well, he's
doesn't make
testifying that the fuse is
Photograph.
burning, and he's been in a murderous rage for weeks,
1,000
months,
words.
years, and it's
That's
coming
true.
to a
Take
head
1,000
right
words.
now.
That's
And
a
I
fair
could show
point.
you one photograph. He
He
can
is
speak
good-
1,000 more words.
Good at
And I can show
dismantling.
you that
their
video.
case.
And what it does is it puts the lie
I'm
to this
torn.
theory
It's so hard for me.
about some kind of murderous rage. But we don't just stop there. We didn't just stop there, because this is serious business. A man's life is at stake. So what do? We talked to Gigi Guerin, his housekeeper. OJ Simpson, by and large, has a great relationship with all the women in his life. And you've met a number of them. Gigi Guerin is the housekeeper. So she came in here, and the great witness said that she was at Knott's Berry Farm on June 12th. She's out with her family. And at 8 o'clock, she wanted to stay over because she's due to come home that evening. She said, "Can I stay over?" And Mr. Simpson says, "Yes, you may." And so I asked her, "How did he sound to you?" He sounded like Mr. OJ Simpson always sounds. The employer that she knows, the relationship that she has with him. You saw her. You observed her. You saw her go through cross-examination. She seemed believable to you? 8 o'clock? I think so. I think you'll find so. Then we know that at 9 o'clock, he talked to Kristen Reichardt, his friend, Dr. Kristen Reichardt. And you saw Chris Reichardt come in here and talk to you. I thought he made a very, very, very good witness from a standpoint of what he had to say. He told you that OJ Simpson sounded even happier than usual. He's more jovial. He got his life back together, and he was moving on. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting way of looking at circumstantial evidence? Let me show you how we differ in this case. The doctor witness comes in and says OJ Simpson is jovial at 9 o'clock on June 12th. Pretty good evidence, wouldn't you say? I think you'd love to have that. Anybody would in the case where you're supposedly in a murderous rage. Instead of Chris Darden standing here and saying, "Well, you know, that's pretty tough evidence for us to overcome," he says OJ Simpson was happy because he was going to kill his wife. Now, if you believe that, I suppose I might as well sit down now, and I'm probably wasting my time. I don't think any of you believe that. That is preposterous. It flies in the face of everything that is reasonable. If you have these two reasonable hypotheses, his isn't even reasonable, but extremely reasonable. You'd have to adopt this, that he's jovial, he's happy. They make a date for that next Wednesday when OJ Simpson returns from back east. You remember that? That's the testimony. Now, Mr. Darden tries to make a big thing of the fact, well, gee, you know, golly, was he depressed about the fact that they had broken up or they finally broken up? He said, yeah, he'd been down. I don't think he never said he was depressed, that he was down or upset. And who wouldn't be? Remember the last questions I asked? If you had just ended a 17-year relationship, it was over, you feel down. For a short period of time, you got your life on. You wouldn't go kill your ex-wife, the mother of your children. OJ Simpson didn't try to kill or didn't kill Nicole Brown Simpson when they got a divorce, when they went through whatever settlement they went through, when Faye Resnick moved in, when any of these things, none of these things happened.
See, why couldn't Zach Anderson get a defense like this?
Because of their
You know,
rush to judgment.
moved on with his life.
Try to come up with
new
some kind of a
girlfriend.
motive. It doesn't make any sense.
Similarities
It
are
doesn't
interesting.
stop
I
with
just
just
noticed.
Kristen Reichardt and what he had to say. And of course, I have his testimony also of what he said.
Well, there's a lot more evidence against the defendant in this
Talk
case
about
than Anderson's case.
The demeanor of
Yeah.
the various people he talked about. But most importantly, he talked about OJ Simpson's demeanor and how it was that night and how he appeared to be. Let me just read you this part here. This is 42537, Council. Question. Now, with regard to the statement about whether or not you talked about Miss Nicole Brown Simpson, that was not the thrust of any of that conversation, was it? Answer, not at all. She wasn't on his mind. This time he's talking about getting ready to go to McDonald's. In fact, do you recall that Mr. Simpson had said that to you, that he was out of the loop, that he was glad to be out of the loop, that he'd gotten his life together with his new lady? Remember him telling you that? Answer, that's correct. And who was that new lady? Answer, Paula Barbieri. Let me just take a moment about Paula Barbieri. One of the most outrageous things I heard yesterday was this wild speculation that OJ Simpson had some kind of falling out with Paula Barbieri on that Sunday.
Did he?
Where is the evidence of that? I mean, that's preposterous. The evidence is quite to the contrary. Remember when OJ Simpson came back into town on Friday? First person who met him and they spent the evening together was Paula Barbieri. And it was interesting because I was having trouble hearing her. She said, I stayed at the house till one of you reminded me, she said, till I went to the prayer meeting. It's where she left. They'd been together that day. And then on the very next day, they went to this dinner in support of Israel. And I guess Mr. Douglas can show us that. This is that dinner. I guess he's really working up that murderous rage that day with those little ladies that he's with. They seem to be really happy to be taking a picture with him. Had no idea we'd ever have to use this to show, to counterbalance this specious, cynical, speculative theory that he's had some kind of a time fuse.
Is that Robert Kardashian's mom with the skunk hairdo?
Demonstrates that. And then we have the testimony of the lady who was there, Carol Connor, about what she called that exquisite moment. And I suppose that she's an artist. You can tell by the way she was dressed when she's here, and she's written this Academy Award-winning love tune. And I guess she sees things maybe that we don't quite see, but she said it was an exquisite moment between OJ Simpson and Paula Barbieri as they were in each other's arms at that particular dinner. Remember, she told you that. Was he thinking about Nicole at that point? Only in Chris Darden's mind. Not in yours, not anything else reasonable. So you have, again, these photographs and these word pictures, which I think amply destroys this. So he continues on about Paula Barbieri. He says, you knew about Paula Barbieri, isn't that correct? Yes, I did. Also, Mr. Simpson had told you that he began dating Paula Barbieri on a regular basis, isn't that correct? Answer, yeah. And that you had said and indicated to the police in an interview that Mr. Simpson seemed to like Paula a lot and seemed happy, or at least happier than he had been before once he was with Paula. Isn't that correct? That's correct, yes. That's what you told the police, isn't it, sir? That's correct. When you talked to the police, Dr. Reichard, were you telling them the truth? Answer, absolutely. And when you are coming here today to testify to this jury, are you telling them the truth? Answer, absolutely. And so, once again, I haven't tried to speculate. I've read to you what the witness said. Now what about this thing that Darden keeps talking about, that he knows?
The closing's a few days long.
He's been out there 8 times on so-called domestic discord cases. They told you that a whole bunch of times. And this is why you have to look with some suspicion at what the prosecutors tell you in this case. Remember Officer Farrell? The officer who...
Yeah, probably would have changed the outcome.
Was a sergeant, I believe, who after the 89 incident went back to the station to try and check and see whether or not there'd ever been any other incidents where any of the police officers in that division in West Los Angeles had been called. You check your notes. And so what he did was he had occasion to check for other domestic discord incidents. This becomes rather important later, as you're going to see. So he talks to us. He says, the question is, all right, so you talked to some officers. How many? Just tell me a number. How many officers did you talk to altogether? Answer, I can't recall. Maybe 10. And did you take any reports from any of those officers? Answer, I requested if they had any information to write out a report and give it to me. Question, And you got a report from one officer, did you not? Answer, that's correct. Question. And that officer's name is Mark Furman.
Dun, dun, dun.
Question. That's correct. And was that the only written report that you received? So now, when Darren stands up here and talks to you about these 8 incidents or whatever where there's nothing happened, they checked with at least 10 of the police officers in that division. Nobody had any recollection of anything of going out there. Now, we know from Ship, the police would stop by there. We know that. Ship told us that. There's some photograph and evidence of OJ Simpson with Ship and maybe some other police officers. That was a place they would stop by on occasion. But this, to tell you 8 to 10 times, they know that was their own witness, Farrell. Then he has the audacity to tell you about stalking. He tells you in opening statement, he's going to tell you and show you OJ Simpson was stalking Nicole Brown Simpson. Now, this is the prosecutor. He proved one incident of stalking? Absolutely not. In fact, yesterday, when he stood up here and told you about OJ Simpson looking in the window of Nicole Brown Simpson's house, I was somewhat dismayed. So I thought, gee, I better get the transcript out again, since the record is the best evidence, not what they say. Because they say it so, isn't so. They said that themselves. And so we talked about this. You remember Mr. Colby and Co., 2 people who lived next door to Nicole on Gretna Green. Remember them? You remember those 2. And Mr. Colby was testifying on this date. It's 13176. I saw him observe the residence next door, then walk around the corner, which would be southerly, then westerly on Shetland, and go back around again and look again at the residence. Well, let me just stop you there, all right? So that it is clear. When you first saw the man who was on the sidewalk 5 feet from Nicole Brown's driveway. There's an objection. Yes, then he walked in a southerly direction, then back around the corner. Our house is on a corner like this, indicating. He then went southerly and then westerly and then back around again. Okay, did he walk back to the same spot he was in when you saw him initially? Yes, he did. And he goes on to talk about him walking within 5 yards of Nicole Brown Simpson's driveway and then walks back. And you remember this was the incident where Mr. Colby said he was embarrassed because he saw this black man in Brentwood and he called the police. And then he found out it was OJ Simpson. Now, nowhere are you going to find in that testimony OJ Simpson was up looking in a window or stalking anybody. He was on the sidewalk out there, presumably waiting for his wife or the kids to come home, and then he left.
The racism undertones are really.
How the people
the entire jury is going to be like,
in this case.
His crime was being a black man in Brentwood.
Yep.
When you go back, you look at this evidence, and I know you're going to be fair and honorable. You look at this, you'll see. You'll make short work of this. You'll make short work of an emotional argument. It was very emotional, but it doesn't add up. It doesn't fit. It wasn't factual. It's for a limited purpose.
This doesn't fit. The aim is perfect.
All of these things are supposedly for motive,
Woven
to
like a
show
tapestry.
how somebody might have acted on June 12th. Interesting, isn't it? Again, in the words of Shakespeare, they're hoisted by their own petard.
He's not black. He's OJ. I love that.
Involving Nicole and Mr. OJ Simpson. Every time they would have an argument, everybody would know about it, whether it was in '89 or the '93.
Or the
They would
911
know
phone
about it
call.
because it'd be loud, it'd be arguing back and forth. There was drinking on the time in '89.
And she'd say, he's trying to kill me.
The evidence was they'd both been drinking. Certainly doesn't make it right, but they were loud arguments where everybody knew about it. What kind of characteristic is that in this case? This is a case about stealth. This is a case about somebody who it seems to me is a professional assassin who kills these 2 people.
A professional
And the
assassin.
thing that is so outrageous for them to stand here and tell you that this is all about Nicole Brown Simpson. Any of you thought during the last year, what if the perpetrators were after Ron Goldman and that envelope that he had in his hand that
What
Dr.
envelope?
Lee found
With the
that
glasses?
smear on?
Yep.
Who in this courtroom would know?
Nicole's mother's glasses. Why would
But what's the
anybody want the envelope?
speculation? This is their theory that they tried to come up with. We don't know.
Yes.
Well, she was almost decapitated, so I would think that she was the primary target. Just saying.
Well,
And why would anybody come after him for the envelope? It had her mother's eyeglasses.
well, they don't know what's in the envelope.
Okay.
People change.
Yeah, the professional assassin thing makes me question, why would a professional assassin go after Ron Goldman? Did they prove he had some mafia ties? Is this what the Colombian necktie theory? Come on, this is ridiculous. No. I mean, Faye Resnick's whole thing about, like, was it her who came up with the whole thing of, like a drug deal gone bad or what? No, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I know I'm supposed to be really pro-defense here, and I do respect, what he's saying, but it just, at a certain point, it just grates on you because it dishonors the victims. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to keep my. This is why I can never be a defense lawyer. Go on.
This is a case of reasonable doubt. This is a case of an innocent man wrongfully accused. They can't answer those questions. No one can under these circumstances. And so we move on and look at other things that don't fit. We know that there was this terrific struggle involving primarily Mr. Goldman as he fought for his life. Why no bruises on Mr. Simpson's body here? Admittedly, this was a violent struggle involving two very, very fit adults. And let's look briefly at the bruises on Mr. Goldman's hands. I don't think we have to cut the feet on this, Your Honor, I don't believe. We talked about this in opening statement. That large bruise on the knuckle, according to Dr. Baden and others, is consistent with Mr. Goldman's fight that he put up for his life. He struck something, probably a person at that point. But Ms. Clark and the others can't even admit that. In the face of doctors, a doctor who did the autopsy, re-examination of the death involving Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy, tells you one thing. The prosecutors say, oh, no, he must have been flailing back, must have hit his hand against a tree or something like that. Only the facts that they want to put into this little contorted theory. But we prove to you otherwise. We prove to you what's reasonable under the circumstances. So I think you saw that in my opening, and I think that is further evidence this was a very, very real fight. And of course, in a real fight, in real life, fights are awkward and clumsy. Oftentimes the combatants are rolling around the ground. And one of the very interesting things in this case is this dugout area near Mr. Goldman's body. Feed you because this area I thought was very, very interesting. You remember I asked Detective Lang about this, and this is going to become very, very important later on. See this area, this dugout area? Remember there's the pager over there, and there's this dugout area. That gives you some idea of the ferocity of this altercation that took place. Remember Dr. Henry Lee talked about blood all around in this area, the keys one place, the beeper someplace else. This dugout area. Interesting, isn't it? Now think with me for a moment. If you fought for 5 to 15 minutes in an area like that, I suppose both parties would have a lot of bruises and marks on them, wouldn't they? Mr. Goldman did, and I bet you his perpetrator does. But there's something else again. They want to tell you, and you hear a lot about socks before we're finished, that these socks that all of a sudden appear to that video, the foot of his bed, were being worn by Mr. OJ Simpson. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you see these socks, what do you think the dirt and dust was on these socks? Now let's see if they can ever explain this. Where was the dirt that was thrown up and moved around on these socks? You're not going to see any. You're not going to see any dirt because those socks weren't there. You see that dirt? You see that dugout? You remember this photograph. What number is this, Mr. Douglas? You remember this. You talk about this case and you wonder whether or not there's a reasonable doubt, whether or not this is an innocent man wrongfully accused. And so you look at this. When you expect, common sense would tell you there'd be bruises and nicks, being kicked, there'd be marks on all the perpetrators. With the heavy foliage there, with the fence and the trees, you would expect.
We're going to go at 10 more minutes and we'll wrap it up for
on
today.
everyone. Whereas Mr. Goldman has more than 30 stab wounds, you would expect this struggle 5 to 15 minutes to have left that. But there's nothing like that in this case. Nothing like that on Mr. Simpson's body. You've seen that before and you'll see it again. Now, in this case,
Thank you.
in this case, in opening statement, I showed you Bob Shapiro's foresight and wisdom. He had these photographs taken, I think on June 15th. Instead of praising this lawyer who was interested in the truth, prosecution says, well, they went to Dr. Heisinger. That wasn't really his doctor. Isn't that preposterous? Dr. Heisinger, by all accounts, is a qualified doctor. He was the Raiders team doctor. So I suppose he's qualified. This is Mr. OJ Simpson's body as it appeared on June 15th. Would you expect to see a lot of bruises and marks on that body? See his back? So these aren't very flattering, but this is not about flattery. It's about his life.
That's not flattering.
Now on his hands. There's some slight abrasions on his hands, but nothing consistent with a fight like this. You know it, I know it, we all know it. We'll talk more about this so-called fish hook cut and where he got that. It'll become very clear when we talk about demeanor, where that came from. Ms. Clark wants to try to confuse that, but that's very, very clear. And so with regard to Mr. Simpson's physical condition, I want to just tell you to take my word to stand there and say, oh, he was in great shape on that day, or he looked good or whatever. Fortunately, we had photographs again. We had graphic evidence of this man's body. This man had not been in a life and death struggle from 5 to 15 minutes. Ms. Clark herself said it. She used a boxing analogy, saying that a boxer's fight for 3 minutes per round. Sometimes it's a knockout in the first round, but in this instance, we know because of the way the injuries were and the blood, this lasted for this period of time. This was a violent struggle. That man that you saw up there was not involved in that violent struggle. And so we did call, Bob Shapiro called Dr. Robert Heisinger as a witness in this case. And you recall that Dr. Heisinger was a very, seemed to me a very credible, honest witness. What did he say? He said that OJ Simpson looks like Tarzan, but he moves more like Tarzan's grandfather. That's not to say that OJ Simpson wouldn't be capable of committing a crime. It's never what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say.
Sounds kind of racist. I don't know.
See this man for who he is. See this man for the arthritis that he suffers. That everybody in his family suffers with arthritis. You saw his mother, you heard his sister, and you heard he has it worse than they have. Now you can still play golf. You can still do that. And some of you
Clearly can still play golf.
But if you have
But he had arthritis. He couldn't murder anybody. He
on
couldn't
certain
grip a
days.
knife. Come on.
What I think it means is you don't go out looking for anybody to be in an altercation with.
Oh, come
OJ Simpson, by
on.
all accounts, has trouble with lateral movement, from moving side to side, because you saw when I had him come over here, those knee operations that basically spelled NFL, National Football League, 4 or 5 times on the left knee, maybe a couple times on the right knee. That's the price that a running back pays. And while I'm talking about running backs, wasn't it interesting yesterday that Ms. Clark in her argument says OJ Simpson was a football player. He has to run through the line, and he has the killer instinct. Is that really stretching it, ladies and gentlemen? OJ Simpson hasn't played football for 15 years. Man's 46 years old now. He's not going to run with anything.
Oh,
anymore.
come on. He can run at 46. Sorry to
Shouldn't know
push
much
back
about
on
sports,
Johnny.
does she?
I
Because a
I
running
like his
back
closing better, but still.
avoids trying to be hit. It's what he does. The problem with them, they don't block. They always run. They try to get out of the way. So he's not looking for contact. He gets
Come
tackled.
on.
But running backs don't try to run over anybody, only like maybe Jim Brown or somebody like
Is
that.
it just me or is this stupid,
That
Jeff?
stuff run out of bounds.
I think it's kind of you.
So
Really?
they grab at everything. Killer instinct.
So you're expecting him to say something that's going to prove he couldn't have done it. That's not his job. His job is to show what the prosecution didn't prove.
Emblematic of the best.
No, I'm not
football
really
player
thinking that.
in
I'm
America.
coming, but I hear you.
And so
Some parts of his
this
argument
was
are more convincing than
brought to
others.
you only to give you some further factors about who this man is, what limitations, if any, he has, to give you a complete picture of who he is.
You know that I
Now
understand.
we shift our attention to Mr.
Probable,
OJ Simpson's
probable,
demeanor.
reasonable doubt.
And I want you to examine with me the conduct both before and after June 12th, 1994, and the manner in which this man reacted and handled himself. You'll remember, let's start off with the week before. We could have gone further back. You know from the evidence that he travels all the time. He hardly has any time to have any fuse for anything. He's never here. He's always traveling for Hertz. He's doing something with sports. He's not here. This particular week was typical of the kind of weeks he has, it seems. He was here on Monday. On Tuesday, he and Paula Barbieri got together and met with this interior designer who'd done work on his house before. She brought out, he's done other work on that house, to change the bathroom around and do some other work. She had a budget and they gave her a check. Now, it's so interesting, isn't it? You change your house or get some work done. Mr. Darden says that's to get Nicole out of the house. Is that stupid? I mean, does that make any sense to you? That's preposterous. Man's moved on with his life. He's having some work done, some interior decorating work done. We prove that. You can't see the positive side of that. OJ Simpson, a check for Collins and Collins, it was Mary Collins. June 7th, $1,000. That was a down payment on the work she was going to do. Again, you saw her. You saw her come in. This work was to be done. They wanted to do it, and Paula Barbieri played a role, a great part in that work. After that, he was on the road. Went back east to play golf with Jack McKay, and you saw Jack McKay. And you remember they were golf buddies. It was a Hertz thing, or not a Hertz thing. This was this association of a retired or something or other. Played golf. But the most important thing I thought was Mr. McKay indicated that, and there was the foursome, Mr. McKay indicated that he observed Mr. Simpson walking and walking with a limp. You'll recall that. And then we came to the Carol Connor dinner, where Carol Connor observed the magic moment on this Saturday. And then we call witnesses from the family. And just before we take the dinner break, let's talk briefly about these witnesses from the family.
That's a perfect place to end. We got 10 more minutes of this particular vid. So I'm done.
You're done.
It's 2:00 in the morning here. We gave it an extra hour because we're trying to get through this as quickly as we can.
Well, thank you for everybody's patience with me. You know, the thing is, I like Cochran's argument a lot better. And I'm obviously, pro-defense in a lot of ways. And there are very many reasons why OJ absolutely should have been acquitted. I just wish that he wasn't. I mean, I come from that personal stance. And I know that you like to take the stance of, we're not here to say who did it. But, obviously I'm opinionated. So I hope you don't mind me sharing my thoughts. And it's, it's a little personal. I'm not going to, like, try to hide that. But overall, from a legal standpoint, I understand,
I'm saying he should have been found guilty, but he wasn't because of the prosecution's bad case. And that's
yes, and the LAPD's corruption and absolutely apparent planting of evidence. So, every LAPD and just the city of Los Angeles in general did a disservice to the Goldman family and to Nicole Brown's family. And it's very sad, but, it happened the way it happened. So can't really go backwards.
Yeah, I still don't think he did it. So I think he had something to do with it. For some weird reason, I believe he was there. I just don't think he actually did it, but that doesn't mean he still shouldn't have been found guilty in another way. But the reason he wasn't found guilty was because of the prosecution.
Well, somebody's asking in chat, what may I ask why it's personal? It's personal for me because I'm a survivor of DV myself. And, generally speaking, if somebody is violent towards their partner once, they're going to be violent towards them again. And so, if he was abusive to her, which there is a record to indicate that that is true, the fact that she ends up dead, it's a very long shot to say that it was somebody else. There are elements of the physical evidence that are difficult to explain, like the lack of, blood in the drains and, the lack of transfer and whatever. I don't think that he necessarily got somebody else to do it for him. I don't think he necessarily would have been there if he got somebody else to do it for him, but I don't really know. We'll never really know. And you feel for the victims. I'm not one of those pro-prosecution people, but I can't help but have a lot of heartache for, the Brown family, and thinking about Dominic Dunn sitting in there with them, and and the Goldman family. I mean, they didn't really get justice, and it's very sad. So it's hard to I understand why people are very pro prosecution, because the victims are important.
And this thing, whether OJ did it or not, they didn't get justice. If he did do it, then a killer walked free. If he didn't do it, they didn't look for the other killer.
Yeah, the whole thing is kind of a mess. I mean, like, the city of LA had infinite resources and they screwed this up royally, but overall, it's like, I really want to separate my feelings out from it, because the whole reason that I love coming and watching with you every week is because I really love learning how somebody delivers an excellent closing argument, how Barry Scheck does a fantastic, cross-examination, the way that he pivots. I'm here to learn how to litigate. That was what drew me to doing this with you. And just because it's such a historic case, it's an LA case, it's something that's, close to me, literally. I mean, I knew, we had a family connection who, my mom was friends with Faye Resnick back in the day, and they went to parties together and stuff. But anyway, yeah, no, it's a 30-year-old case, and I feel for the families, and it's hard for the kids, and seeing him there smiling with his daughter and everything. It's just thinking what happened after that, and that she lost her mom, and it's got to be really hard on the whole family. So anyway, I feel for the victims. I'm trying not to be too pro prosecution, but I respect and understand the rules. Obviously, I do.
Oh no, people should feel bad for the family. People should feel bad for the victims. But you should be angry at the prosecution.
I am. I definitely am. I'm not. And I think Johnnie Cochran does an excellent job defending his client. It's always hard for me, because, it's I had a moment where I wanted to be a defense attorney when I watched the Zach Anderson case. And then watching this, it's looking at Johnnie up there, I'm just I can't do it. I know it's one of those cliche, stupid things. I make fun of people who say things like, I could never be a defense lawyer because what if my client was guilty? But it's just, some people have the stomach for it and some people don't. And I don't think I do. So I think I'm just going to stick with transactional law. But,
Well, but put the lawyer thing aside. It's the same thing if you're a juror.
Mm-hmm. How so?
And that's I mean, that's why they ask on the jury questionnaires, have you been a victim of this type of violence?
Yeah, it would be hard for me.
So
I couldn't have been a juror in this case. Definitely not. I couldn't have been a juror in the Depp Heard case. There are a lot of juries that I would be excluded from. So it's way too personal for me. I can't avoid it. No matter how hard I try to be objective, it's just it rattles me. So
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That's why they have those questions on the jury questionnaire, so that.
And you prefer a jury who isn't biased. You prefer a jury who isn't going to come from an emotional place.
Need those. Yeah, you need those.
I readily admit that I'm not a good person to judge a case like this, but somebody else should do something like that. So if I was, ever called for jury duty, I would want to be excluded from a case like this, because I would not be able to deliver a just verdict. I would be too biased. So there's bias, it's just, we all have our biases. We all have things that hit really close to home, and that's part of voir dire. So anyway.
Yeah, but, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to be on jury.
But aside from that, I really love his closing, because I think that he does an excellent job defending his client. That's what he's there to do. He delivers his lines fantastically, the theme continuously, and he's just so much better than Chris Darden. Chris Darden is such a snooze fest. I prefer watching Johnnie Cochran, even if it riles me up. It makes me feel stuff. So he's convincing, and no matter how, some of his points are weaker, but he's just bringing the jury along on a journey. He's compelling. You want to listen to him, and he has a lot. He points out all the flaws and pokes all the holes, and he makes it very clear. we don't have to prove anything. The state does. And the state failed, 100% failed. I completely acknowledge that.
And I mean, it's also why the prosecution gets to go last. They have the burden of proving. Now they get to stand up and go, yeah, all this thing about his knee surgery and moving sideways and all that's a bunch of crap. They get to make that argument in their rebuttal.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. Cochran can have some weak points and some strong points, but what he needs to do is bring a continuous narrative together that's going to, sort of convince the jury, compel the jury. He's very persuasive. And, was he a preacher at some point? I feel like I heard that he was.
No, just kind of his style of talking.
I love his, like his, natural cadence. He's very engaging, and he seems well rested and prepared, and he takes it seriously. Chris Darden feels like he wants to go home. He wants it to be over. He knows he's lost. It's kind of sad, and the way that they're responding to him in the court, like looking at their faces, it's just like, come on, that's so you're not making yourselves look good. So it's no wonder. I'm looking forward to it. How much more of his closing do we have? I
don't know. I think probably 2 or 3 more weeks.
Well, thank you for letting me share something a little bit personal, but I do appreciate this case, and I do appreciate the way that it was litigated. It's important to be able to be objective and not biased, especially if you want to go into law. So, that's just one of those things that you've got to work on if you want to be a lawyer and you want to work in a field like that.
Yeah, I think you have to work on it if you want to be a lawyer kind of in that particular field, but it's not something you have to work on if you want to be a juror or if you don't want to be a juror. I mean, you look at it from the everyman perspective. Equality with probably the last super chat of the day, the Canadian $5, sending a big hug to Chandler.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Equality. Yeah, I like being open and honest, and I care about this case, and I think that, it's a little messed up how it all shaked out, but it was appropriate and necessary, and he should not have been found guilty. He absolutely should have been acquitted, and I appreciate that he was acquitted, even though...
Based on the evidence that was presented and the way it was presented.
Exactly, because it's not about, whether you have a gut feeling, whether that person is guilty. It's about what the state can prove. And that's really important to remember. So I appreciate that everybody comes to LawTube and they all really want to learn about law, and they try to respect the way that we put that all together. So just, I'm always glad to co-host, and I'm very glad to do OJ with you.
JKD Buck wanted to get the last word in. Thanks for the great streams.
Thank you, JKD Buck, for a super chat. We appreciate you. I always love JKD Buck, who leaves fantastic comments on everything. You guys are awesome. I love chat. Legal Vices chat is the best chat in all of LawTube.
All righty, let's see if there's someplace we can send people here when we wrap this up in a couple of minutes.
I'm so excited for tomorrow. I don't know if everybody knows or heard the announcement, but we're doing Ozzy's birthday stream. I think his birthday a couple days ago, and it's going to be 4 a.m. for me, 4 to 7 a.m. But I'm going to do it because I'm a trooper. And I think
he changed it again to Sunday.
Did he? Okay.
Saturday night, something like that.
Oh, really? Okay. I could probably do that. Also, in the middle of this, I got a message from Flux, and Flux asked, do you want to come on Fluxing Around tonight? And of course I said yes, because I love Flux. Hey. We're the same person. She's my favorite. One of my favorite people besides you, who I've met through this whole experience. So we're going to do that at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be fluxing around on Flux's channel. So be sure to check that out.
I'll be watching it from the office.
Awesome.
All right. Redirect. Who are we getting? Who are we? I can't even talk anymore. I'm tired now. Megan Fox. What's Megan Fox? True Crime Thursday is what Megan
Fox. Megan Fox. Absolutely. Megan's been doing this great stuff about that Bachelor case. You've been doing that too. Yep. Fantastic. Yep. Love it.
And wow, I am literally falling asleep right here because it's 2 a.m. So Chandler, give us your final grift.
All right, I'm Chandler Remington. I'm a paralegal from Los Angeles, California. I advocate for men. I'm doing a Wicked Women series every Friday. Next week, we're going to have Danny on, and we're going to talk about killer moms. I'm planning on getting some other really great guests. And this week, I'm going to do a Saturday stream where we're going to be talking about the second part of female predators. That's going to be fantastic. I'm going to be on a bunch of stuff. Ozzy's birthday stream. We're going to do flexing around tonight. I'm going to probably be doing layback news. Stick around. I'm going to get a lot of new content up. Going to do some shorts and some other stuff. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Become a member if you like. I'm going to do a members only stream next month. I'm really doing the YouTube thing now. I'm finally committing to it. So thank you, everybody, for watching Legal Vices. Make sure that you like this stream if you haven't already. Make sure that you're subscribed and you turn on notifications for Legal Vices. And be sure to come back next time, because next week we're going to finish closing arguments, and it's going to be fantastic.
Oh, not next week. We still got about 6 weeks left. We got about 6 weeks left.
I mean, just finishing Johnny's. No,
we got
a couple more weeks.
At least 2 weeks of Johnny. Then we're going to hear from Barry Scheck for a while. Then we're going to hear from Johnny again. Then we got rebuttal from the prosecution. And
Barry, we get Barry again. Also, okay, we'll just tune in for more closing arguments. We're going to finish it eventually. And I love that everybody comes. All of you guys who are regulars, I really appreciate you. And I love that you guys come and tune in for OJ, because I know it's kind of like Jeff's least watched stream, but I think it's the most fun. And I always love being here. Obviously, I ruin it. If I wasn't here, you'd get more viewers. But, I can't help it. You can't get rid of me.
And Been There, Done That says last. And Bootyberry says last.
I love all the super chats. Thank you, Been There, Done That. And thank you, Bootyberries, for the fantastic super chats.
And for me, if I can keep everything situated in my brain here, Friday night U.S. time, we will be doing Becky Hill updates. We'll be reading some stories about her and the 2 criminal investigations that she's facing. Then we'll be doing Aussies at whatever point that happens. Then Sunday morning U.S. time, we'll be doing a members only stream. So I'll send out the notification for that. And Monday's Maritime Monday to the Penley lifeboat disaster. We're going to revisit that. Tuesday will be the Jane Doe and Clayton Eckert bizarre case there. We're going to be looking at some more documents that have recently come to light, and maybe if we have some time, one or two of the hearings. That'll be Tuesday. Wednesday, can't remember what I was going to do. Thursday will be OJ again. Then next Friday is the F It Friday Legal Vices Lady Bits. And let's see, scrolling down here on my list to see, so far for that, we have lined up Flux, Lauren De Laguna, Steph the Alter Nerd, Chandler Remington, Ari Jacob, Radix Verum, Christina, Talk with Sally, Waifu Kron Jess, AV to the 7th Power, Lady Law 5791, and Jasmine Jafar.
That is a fantastic list. This is going to be like a really estrogen filled stream. And the funny thing is, like, people think I hate women. I love women. I'm so excited. This is going to be so sexy and fun. Girl party with Legal Vices. You get all the girls, you get all the ladies. You're just a hot chick magnet.
Parasocial relationships.
Oh, come on. They're real friendships. I hugged you in Houston. Yes, I know. We had a lot of fun.
So that's what's coming up for me for the next week. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you, mods, for doing this. See you for more OJ next week. All the support. Thank you very much for the super chats, the memberships, just for being here and talking with us. And as always, my super special, wonderful, amazing OJ co-host, Chandler Remington. Let's all go say hi to Megan Fox. Tell her I sent ya. Well, one last thing. Dave Neal. He was on here talking about Jane Doe and Clayton. I'm fading. Clayton Eckert. He was on my channel. Then he went on Megan yesterday, and he will be on Tug's channel this evening. Tug's going to be interviewing him this evening. So if you want to see more of him, check out Tug at Tug's usual time, I guess. All right, that's it. We're done. I'm out here. I'm going to sleep. It's 2:18 a.m. And good night, everybody. See ya. Tell Megan hi as soon as I find my outro here. There it is. Bye.